Começou. Começou. Salve, galera. Todo mundo aí da live. Eu e o Dayon aqui vamos fazer uma análise barra react, né, do Congresso aí, desse evento que aconteceu nos Estados Unidos sobre os OVNIs, os fenômenos UAP, que agora eles chamam, né, os fenômenos que antigamente era chamado de UFO, né, UFO. O UAP é Unknown Anomalous Fenômenos, né, que eles falam. Buguei. Enfim, em inglês, eles estão investigando agora qualquer tipo de fenômeno anômalo, tipo, não natural, sabe, que leva para essa questão dos OVNIs, sei lá, uma coisa sobrenatural que não é explicado pela ciência convencional. Então eles deram essa sigla de UAP agora. Antes era UFO. E o Dayon é um amigo meu que a gente se conectou aí através do Bruno Borges, lembra? O menino do Acre. A gente estava num grupo juntos ali e tal. E o Dayon encontrou ele num negócio aleatório e a gente se conectou. A gente bateu muito. Inclusive, eu e o Dayon tem uma sincronicidade, né? Que a gente faz aniversário no mesmo dia. Então tem uma conexão astrológica, falando assim, né? E é bem legal. A gente tem umas ideias bem parecidas. Obviamente, ninguém é igual. Todo mundo tá aqui para ajudar o outro na evolução, na consciência, na perspectiva, né? E o Dayon vai aparecer mais vezes aqui no canal, hein? Se vocês gostaram dele, a gente tem um projeto aí. Na verdade, já está pronto, né? A gente só precisa apresentar. Que isso pode até ser o início dos vídeos que a gente vai fazer ao vivo sobre essas questões e outras maiores, sabe? Se apresenta aí, Dayon, pra galera.
Então, aí galera, boa noite, meu nome é Dayon, que nem o Renan falou. A gente se conectou cosmicamente aí pelas conexões da vida, as conexões mágicas da alma. E então, eu tô muito empolgado para essa live de hoje, para falar sobre essa reunião, porque para quem não assistiu ainda, cara, é uma reunião muito incrível, é muito doido isso que tá acontecendo, entendeu? Quando eu fui assistir semana passada e eu não tava acreditando que era real, eu falei, cara, isso aqui parece coisa de filme, tá? Tanto a questão das testemunhas, que as coisas que eles estão respondendo, mas as perguntas também que estão sendo feitas para eles, o nível, a intensidade da conversa é muito interessante. E saiu alguns materiais na internet, assim, alguns cortes, alguns vídeos, né, do pessoal comentando, mas são só alguns cortes da reunião. Então, o pessoal eu não achei tão interessante e tal, mas o pessoal só viu um corte e a reunião tem 2 horas. Então, assim, eles conversam sobre várias coisas, é muito massa. Então, é muito interessante. E, que nem o Renan falou, agora eles estão usando esse termo UAP, né, que antes era UFO, que é o nosso, em português, OVNI, objetos voadores não identificados. UFO é o equivalente disso em inglês. Mas não é só mais objetos voadores não identificados, né? Agora eles estão tratando de UAPs, que são eventos, fenômenos anômalos identificados, né? Então, pode ser qualquer tipo de fenômeno. Seja uma coisa saindo do mar, seja uma coisa andando, um ser, uma entidade, uma abdução, algo voando, né? Então é muito mais abrangente o termo UAP. Né? Então, para quem não conhece, esse é o termo UAP, né? E eles convocaram essa reunião e eles chamaram 3 pessoas, 3 testemunhas, tá? Para estar falando sobre esses depoimentos. 2 deles são pilotos da Aeronáutica Americana que estão falando sobre avistamentos que eles mesmos presenciaram, que sabem de colegas. E um outro, ele estava trabalhando num serviço de inteligência dos Estados Unidos também. Então, ele fazia entrevista e conversava com várias pessoas sobre esses assuntos. Tá? Sobre a questão de avistamento, pesquisa de vida extraterrestre. Então, assim, cara, é uma reunião muito interessante, tá legendada, comentada aí. Então, aproveita, porque é um material exclusivo, muito interessante aí, precisa aproveitar. E, cara, é um material fresquinho, aconteceu semana passada, e a gente tem que estar se inteirando disso, porque é algo, assim, revolucionário. Um mini spoiler, no final da reunião eles até falam: obrigado pela participação de todos, hoje nós fizemos história. Então, realmente é uma reunião histórica.
Sim, com certeza. E eu não assisti a reunião a fio por inteira, vi os pedaços ali mais importantes e tal, uns cortes. Então, o meu react vai ser quase sincero aqui, tipo, assistindo quase ao vivo com vocês. E vai ser mais leve, a gente vai comentar aqui, normal, a galera vai participar aqui com a gente. Mande essa live aí para quem se interessa no assunto. Porque eu vi canais fazendo, né, a análise sobre o acontecimento, né, sobre o Congresso. Mas são canais mais ali da ciência mainstream, mais, né, do povão ali, tipo assim, do povão que a gente chama assim, que a galera que ainda não aceitou que isso é real, tá ligado? Eles estão ainda no nível científico da parada, precisa de prova, precisa Mas nós, pesquisadores, e a galera que segue uma ciência ali mais alternativa, tem vários pesquisadores sérios nessa área, já tem inúmeras, digamos que não, tipo assim, provas, né? Obviamente, mas também toda uma outra perspectiva, uma filosofia mais abrangente sobre essas questões que, com certeza, depois que isso for sendo digerido, né, pelo status quo e tal, essas pessoas que já pesquisam isso há anos vão ser chamadas, com certeza, para dar opiniões, para agregar sobre as questões, sei lá, das leis, sei lá, de como entender isso de uma forma científica. Então, essa live é mais pra galera que já tá nesse meio, assim, entendeu? Eu não vi gente falando sobre isso ao vivo, fazendo um react, pelo menos eu não vi. Acho que a gente, né, os primeiros a fazer isso. E vamos lá, vamos pra live, que é grande, sem outra introduçãozinha aqui, só pra gente dar um norte pra vocês, assim, do que aconteceu, do que tá acontecendo. E o que eu tinha dito numa live anterior é que, tipo assim, é engraçado que eu tinha feito um vídeo sobre o filme do Oppenheimer, sobre a criação da bomba atômica, e que 2 anos depois teve o maior incidente, né, de OVNIs do mundo, acho que é o pivô, é o acontecimento pivô dessas conspirações dos ETs, dos Greys, do acidente de Roosevelt, no Novo México, no mesmo estado, 2 anos depois, tipo assim, não tinha nenhum país que tinha armas nucleares, e 2 anos depois teve o incidente do Roosevelt ali, tá ligado? Tipo, no mesmo estado, tá ligado? É aquilo que eu tinha dito no vídeo, que se civilizações superiores estão nos observando, eles não interferem aqui porque ainda a gente não tem tanta influência no, sei lá, no cosmos. Só que depois que o ser humano, tipo, chegou a um patamar evolutivo de tecnologia capaz de destruir ele, esses seres que já estão aqui há, tipo, sei lá, civilizações de milênios, milhões de anos avançadas, observando a gente, eles veem seres como nós tratando uma tecnologia tão nociva, de, tipo assim, capaz até de destruir a raça humana, eles iam intervir aqui, sei lá. Então tem todo esse rolê, tipo de, eles interviram nesse tempo porque nós criamos uma tecnologia capaz de nos destruir. Vamos frear eles, vamos trazer consciência para eles sobre outras coisas, outras civilizações, sabe? Então, cara, uma coincidência meio estranha, né? Já começa por aí. E acontece esse evento na mesma temporada aí que esse filme foi lançado. Enfim, nada é coincidência pra mim, né? Acho que é sincronicidade.
E essa questão até... A gente já vai começar, gente, só comentando aqui inicialmente, mas essa questão até da gente ter... A gente tá pesquisando e falando, tem ET ou não, tem várias pessoas hoje, tem várias opiniões em relação a isso. E daí tem que comentam sobre... Eles têm essa política de não interferência, né? Eles não podem interferir. Mas, se a gente for voltar um pouco na história, várias civilizações antigas falavam sobre os deuses astronautas, sobre a presença de outras civilizações das estrelas, seres evoluídos com muito conhecimento. Então, assim, talvez a gente não tenha tanto contato hoje em dia, né? Mas, segundo a história dos nossos antigos, tem vários relatos de várias civilizações assim, no mundo inteiro. Inclusive, o canal do Renan tá cheio de vídeos sobre isso. Então... E esse isolamento galáctico, vamos dizer assim, né? A gente está isolado das outras civilizações, isso está acontecendo hoje em dia, e a gente vai passando por um processo chamado disclosure, que é o quê? Essa revelação, essa divulgação, né? Então é o momento que o governo, a mídia, começam a falar sobre isso abertamente, falar, gente, peraí, a gente talvez não esteja sozinho no universo, tem outras civilizações. Só que esse disclosure, por uma questão de psicologia social, ele tem que ser muito bem feito. Você não simplesmente pode chegar na notícia, assim, no jornal e falar, existe ET, né? Porque isso vai colapsar a realidade de muitas pessoas, de muitas religiões, de várias questões, e as pessoas podem entrar numa crise coletiva, planetária, assim. Então isso é uma coisa que tem que ser feita aos poucos, tem que ser explicada, para as pessoas irem absorvendo e compreendendo isso, né?
Sim.
E parece que a gente está passando por um disclosure, porque em 2017 o Pentágono já liberou vídeos de OVNIs lá, falando assim, tem aqui objetos voadores não identificados que o Pentágono, tipo assim, né, do exército americano não consegue identificar, então se você acha que identifica, cara, você é muito bom, porque o Pentágono não consegue identificar, isso aqui é um óbvio. E agora, em 2023, a gente tá tendo essa reunião, então é como se a gente estivesse subindo essa escadinha que cada vez mais o assunto vai se tornando público e as pessoas vão tomando consciência sobre isso. Então, enfim, acho que bora assistir o vídeo aí e comentar, porque é muito massa.
Eu ia só dar um adendo que, tipo assim, disclosure, revelação, revelations, né? Na Bíblia, Apocalipse, final dos tempos, as taças que se consomem, no final de um ciclo, pode estar atrelado a essa revelação também de outras coisas, né? Outras civilizações. Para mim faz total sentido. Soul Alma.
E a verdade vos libertará.
Soul Alma mandou um donate aí, R$2. Valeu, tamo junto. Eu vim em paz. Ou eu vim em paz. Eu já tinha dito que, tipo assim, tem... Obviamente, se você olhar o ser humano autoconsciente ali, tem seres humanos, né, que são inclinados a fazer o bem e também inclinados para o mal. Então, podem ter civilizações também com essas inclinações. É meio óbvio, é tipo um arquétipo universal, né? Então, sem mais delongas, vamos lá. Começar a assistir aqui. A gente vai dar as pausas, vai comentar. Tá legendado aqui, tá? A legenda não tá... A legenda... Presta atenção. Não tá 100%, tá? Mas a gente vai dar uma ajudada aqui em vocês sobre o contexto, sobre todo o sentido da reunião, entendeu? Às vezes pode estar um bug aí na legenda, porque eu não conferi tudo, porque é muito... Pô, se eu for conferir, a gente nem ia fazer live hoje, né? Mas tá ok, tá, tipo... Dá pra digerir muita coisa, inclusive com a gente falando aqui, comentando. Bora lá? Let's dali.
Bora revelar.
The subcommittee hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. Additionally, without objection, the following members are waived onto the subcommittee for the purpose of participating in today's hearing: Mr. Burchett of Tennessee, Ms. Luna of Florida, Mr. Getz of Florida, Mr. Burleson of Missouri, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez of New York, and Mr. Ogles of Tennessee. Without objection, so ordered. For today's subcommittee hearing, both the chair and ranking member will have 10 minutes for opening remarks. We may both be giving some of those minutes to other members of our party. I'm now going to recognize myself for 10 minutes. I'm actually going to try to get out of here in about 4, and then we'll give it to some of my friends over here. Good morning and welcome to the most exciting subcommittee in Congress this week, the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs, for discussion of unidentified anomalous phenomenon. I'd like to thank the brave military pilots and personnel, such as the witnesses on the panel today, for sharing their stories on how they've engaged UAPs, which has brought attention to this matter. Curiosity and speculation from all walks of life have generated interest in studying what UAPs are and what threats they may pose. I will say that when I was younger in school, I read a book, a 1966 book called Flying Saucers, Serious Business, and for a while, when I was a little bit younger, I thought it was the most important issue out there. The lack of transparency regarding UAPs, which was one of the themes of that book, in any event, it's led to interest in studying what UAPs are and what threats they pose. The lack of transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in the very institutions that are meant to serve and protect them, as is evidenced by the large number of people we have here. I also want to point out in 1966, President Gerald Ford claimed to have seen a UFO, and in 1969 in Georgia, Jimmy Carter claimed to have seen a UFO. So this has led Congress to establish entities to examine UAPs. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2022 established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to conduct or to coordinate efforts across the Department of Defense and other federal agencies to detect, identify, and investigate UAPs. However, AARO's budget remains classified, prohibiting meaningful oversight from Congress.
Só lembrando aqui, que eu lembrei que em 2017 eles falaram que o vídeo é real, né? Eles falaram que aquele vídeo da Marinha Americana era real. Em 2020 eles assumiram que eles não sabiam o que era aquilo. Agora que eu lembrei, foi em 2020 que eles falaram, o vídeo é real e a gente não sabe o que é. Aí em 2023 teve agora essa audiência. Doideira. Continuando.
E só mais um comentário, o pessoal que está participando do comitê aí, que está fazendo os questionamentos, é interessante também ver o posicionamento deles, o jeito que eles constroem as perguntas, porque é como se praticamente todos eles têm uma posição que acreditam ou conhecem, assim, sabe? Então, não é como se ele estivesse numa postura cética nessa reunião, ou questionando, ou neutra. Você vê que eles têm um posicionamento meio ativo de, tipo, vamos revelar isso, vamos falar sobre isso e vou ter conhecimento sobre isso. Então, percebo o tom das conversas, o nível das perguntas, assim, é interessante ver o posicionamento de cada um.
Eu percebi que eles estão interessados também, né? Não é aquela conversa um pouco imparcial, eles estão incisivos, né, nas perguntas.
Sim.
Muito da hora.
Eles têm um posicionamento real, assim, é bem interessante.
In addition to AARO's efforts, NASA is leading an independent study on UAPs that will identify how UAP data is gathered from both civilian and government entities that can be analyzed to shed light on the topic. However, despite these offices being established, there lies a pressing demand for government transparency and accountability that cannot be overlooked. And that's been a problem that's been around for 50 years. The Biden administration handling of the Chinese spy balloon that violated U.S. airspace is one example how the government is not prepared for these. The Biden administration's description of events has shown that the government continues not to be forthright. Between the Chinese balloon being shot down and 2 UAPs subsequently shot down following the event earlier this year, the U.S. government spent $1.5 million in taxpayer dollars on missiles, yet we have seen little clarity from the Biden administration.
Dayon, tu ficou sabendo desse balão, né? Do balão chinês e tal.
Acho que não.
Não, é que teve um acontecimento. Eles relataram que teve um fenômeno, um WAP, né? E eles falaram que era um balão chinês espionando ali o... Só, eu não lembro o local que foi constatado esse WAP, né? Agora que eles falam assim. Mas os Estados Unidos, é um balão de espionagem, não sei o quê. Então, também esses comitês, esses congressos estão sendo realizados porque eles também estão nessa dúvida até de tensão, um pouco de espionagem, de, né, trazer essa perspectiva de guerra e tal. Então, é uma coisa muito até pesada de falar, assim, meio... Como é que fala? Coisa delicada, é um assunto muito delicado porque envolve questão de segurança nacional e tal.
Sim.
Segurança planetária também.
É doido até porque nas perguntas e no posicionamento que eles vão assumindo, você vê que eles estão até meio que questionando o próprio governo, assim, é como se fosse uma treta do alto escalão, assim, sabe? Os caras, o governo tá ocultando isso aqui tá acontecendo, olha aqui, é uma reunião até, de certa forma, conspiracionista contra o governo, assim, então isso é muito doido, na verdade.
Parece até, tipo, zoeira, né? Parece que é tipo, coisa de filme real, igual você falou.
É muito doido.
We must demand transparency from the Department of Defense, our intelligence community, and our defense industry on the UAP work. We're going to ask some questions about that today. Congress recognizes the subject of UAPs is multifaceted and requires a careful, data-driven approach. Today, we'll see clarity from these witnesses' testimonies, or we'll seek clarity as to what can be done to improve reporting for military and civilians and remain committed to objective inquiry. Congress should work to ensure that knowledge is not driven by fear. Today, we are not just debating the existence of UAPs, we are deliberating on the principles that define our republic, which is a commitment to transparency and accountability. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about ways we can improve government efficiency and openness when it comes to UAPs. I thank each of you for your presence here today and for your dedication to safeguarding the interests of the American people. I look forward to your testimony. Now I'm going to turn it over for 2.5 or 3 minutes to Representative Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody for making this happen today, and I want to remind everybody this is a nonpartisan issue. This has nothing to do with party politics. I think the cover-up goes a lot deeper than that. I also want to thank my colleagues, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, sitting beside me here, Jared Moskowitz, my friend across the aisle, has an incredible mind, and I'm anxious to hear his questions. My buddy Eric Burleson, and it's not in my notes here, but Matt Gates. If it hadn't been for Matt Gates, myself, him, and Luna would still be down at Eglin Air Force Base trying to get some answers. He's got an incredible legal mind. Also, I know I saw it in the crowd there, George Knapp, my buddy Jeremy Corbell. They're not witnesses, but they've provided some statements on this subject, and I seek unanimous consent to enter those statements into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Also, would like to enter in, I understand now that this is unclassified and it's public record, but as we all know, that's sometimes difficult for the public to get a hold of. A report, Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, Advanced Space Propulsion Based on Vacuum
Olha o tanto de coisa que eles estão falando ali. Eles falam que isso não vem a público, mas também porque é difícil vir a público, porque é difícil até falar, é difícil até você dar um norte pra galera, tipo, preparar o terreno. Então, o Dayon a gente tinha conversado, né, e obviamente a gente conversa todo dia. O Dayon falou, não, isso é uma espécie de disclosure que vai sendo aos poucos, assim, né, em camadas pra galera ir, tipo... Porque, pô, imagina, eles lança a braba, sei lá, pra mim uma braba master seria aparecer um ser, tá ligado? Alguma coisa, uma foto, alguma coisa, tá ligado? Mas enfim, vamos lá.
E eles correm risco também de estar falando sobre essas coisas, né, profissionalmente, na vida, então é muito delicado, assim, é tudo muito delicado. Então,
Parece até tipo...
aí.
Olha o que a gente tá reagindo aqui, pô. Um comitê sério, tá ligado? De uma parada dos Estados Unidos ali, feito sob juramento ali do país, né? Crime, tipo, crime contra a pátria, né? Que falam que se você mentir sobre com a mão ali na Bíblia e tal, sei lá, é crime contra o país, mano. Tipo, mano, que doideira, mano. A gente tá vivendo uma época muito sinistra, assim.
Muito doideira.
Isso é histórico, isso é histórico.
Space-time metric engineering, some light reading for some of our members.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Knapp wrote, since 1969, the position our military has been that UFOs pose no threat to national security and are not worthy of further study. I'd say that's the biggest understatement of the decade. And he also goes on to talk about the dismissive attitude and said odds with what was revealed in documents, reports, and internal memos. Mr. Cabral says, as he writes these words, the UFO is emerging as a major topic of global importance. I can state that as a fact. Out there, I met a fellow who came in here all the way from Denmark to be here for this meeting. So this is huge. This is worldwide.
This is huge.
I think we suspect what's going on, but I'd also like to thank the members of Congress who have supported our efforts to make this hearing happen. Some have even confided to me that they've had UFO sightings of their own. Those members, of course, some of them wish to remain anonymous, and I'll keep it that way. But also, finally, I'd like to thank these three brave witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and dadgummit, they're doing it. And we owe them a debt of gratitude.
Batendo palma pra testemunha.
Batendo palma pros caras, tipo assim... Vamos bater palma aqui pra eles, porque eles tiveram coragem de dar as caras, tá ligado? Tipo, sei lá.
Y'all quit clapping, you're cutting in on my time. Just kidding. These folks, they've got nothing to gain from this, and I think you're going to find out that they've endured quite a few slings and arrows. We need to remember them in our prayers and their families. And I'm thankful to them for their honest testimonies. They have done interviews and appeared in documentaries like Accidental Truth to get their stories out there, and now they are all here to testify under oath for Congress.
Aí entra aquela questão, né, duvidosa, conspiracionista, de tipo assim, eles fizeram esse congresso pra maquiar uma outra coisa maior ainda, tá ligado? Porque, tipo assim, se eles estão lançando isso a público, e é porque tem sempre esse pé atrás, né, que a gente tem. Pô, imagine se eles estão jogando algo que é quase risível, tipo assim, não tão importante a público, porque já não é tão mais importante isso. Tem outras coisas mais importantes que não pode ser revelado. Ou você...
Não sei, teve várias pessoas falando sobre essa cortina de fumaça aí, né? Isso aí é só pra mascarar outra coisa maior, mas acho que é uma visão meio pessimista sempre pensar isso. Será que não pode ter algo de bom mesmo acontecendo? Realmente eles revelando informações importantes e tipo, algo de bom não pode estar acontecendo no mundo, sabe?
A questão mais importante que eu vejo, além dessas coisas do universo e tal que eu vejo, é a questão do colapso, sei lá, global, sobre algo, sobre uma moeda, sobre, sabe? Porque quando envolve aqui o mundo, tá ligado? Que agora no físico, que é o quê? Que é o poder do dinheiro, essa influência que tem, né, das empresas e tal. Se tiver um colapso já acontecendo sobre isso, eles vão querer maquiar com outra coisa, sabe? É a única, sei lá, alternativa que eu vejo de ser mais importante de não falar, tá ligado? Enfim, minha opinião. Ia falar alguma coisa?
Não, acho que vamos continuar.
It's difficult to get here today. I said, in the Baptist church, we'd say that the devil's in our way. And the devil has been in our way through this thing. We've run into roadblocks from members, from the intelligence community, the Pentagon. I proposed legislation to go in the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them. And that's exactly the point. This is an issue of government transparency. We can't trust a government that does not trust its people.
Cara,
We're
olha
not
isso.
bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing.
Quer comentar?
Não, tipo, não, é só, tipo assim, os caras indo contra o governo, assim, a favor da população. É uma parada muito transcendental. Tipo, enfim, vamos continuar, é muito doido.
Hearing. Sorry to disappoint about half y'all. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this. And I yield back the remainder of my time. I think, is it to Representative Luna, Mr. Chairman? Or is that?
Yeah, we'll call Ms. Luna for her statement.
The circumstances surrounding UAPs has captivated the attention of the American people for decades, ingrained in even the minds of our nation's leaders from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump, Marco Rubio to Chuck Schumer, John Radcliffe to National Security Council officials. Yet from Roswell, New Mexico to the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, the sightings of UAPs have rarely been explained by the people who have first-hand accounts of these situations.
Tá vendo? Eles sempre citam o Roosevelt. Roosevelt, tipo, pivô o início dessa parada, tá ligado? Falam que eles gastaram milhões pra tentar ocultar, tipo assim, com a papelada, com toda a questão que foi desenrolada com esse acontecimento de Roosevelt, né? Mas enfim.
This is largely due to the lack of transparency by our own government and the failure of our elected leaders to make good on their promises to release explanations and footage and mountains of overclassified documents that continue to be hidden from the American people. This isn't just how I feel. In fact, the American people largely believe that the government has actively covered up the truth about UAPs. One poll in particular found that 68% of Americans believe that the government is hiding information about UAPs and not being honest about what we know about them. And from my personal experience, I believe the same thing. Another poll found that nearly half Americans believe that the federal government is doing a very bad or somewhat bad job of dealing with reports of UFO sightings. As Representative Burchett just referenced on the FAA bill that just went through, you can tell that that's exactly happening. Considering the thousands of testimonies and videos taken on people's phones and eyewitnesses' accounts made by credible witnesses such as doctors, pilots, scientists, and active duty service members, it is unacceptable to continue to gaslight Americans into thinking that this is not happening or that the potential of intelligent life forms exists other than humans. Even more alarming is the fact that these eyewitnesses are many of times service members and have no assurance that their lives will not be negatively impacted or even harmed by their experiences. In being an active duty service member working on an airfield, I've had conversations with many pilots where they were in fear of coming forward for retribution and or being taken off flight status. How do we know this? Because the government has said nothing to assure us otherwise. They have also did nothing to calm the concerns of over 20% of Americans who have reported to have seen UFOs or UAPs. We are simply told not to question the government and that the government has it under control. Today is the first hearing of its kind where we will attempt to get down to the bottom of what is actually happening with UAPs. But we will hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a skiff prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grush, who has knowledge of classified information. It is time to have an open-minded discussion on this topic, to hear the evidence and understand the magnitude of what this means not just for our nation, but for humanity. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back the rest of my time.
Só um comentário bem rápido. Ela usa uma expressão, ela fala gaslight, né? Usa gás, enfim. É uma expressão do inglês bem famosa que eles usam lá, geralmente para relacionamento abusivo, tá? Que é, rapidinho, vem de um filme que tem uma lâmpada a gás e ela fica piscando nesse filme. Daí tem o marido e a esposa. Daí o marido começa a mentir pra esposa, porque a esposa fala assim, a lâmpada tá piscando. E ele fala, não tá piscando, você tá louca. E ela fica, não, mas tá piscando. Ele, não, a lâmpada não pisca, você tá louca. E ele fica criando essa mentira na cabeça dela ao longo do filme, e ela começa a questionar a própria sanidade dela. Então é como se ele implantasse uma loucura na cabeça dela, sabe? Ele tá gaslighting ela, ele tá distorcendo os fatos, enganando, tá? Pra ela achar que ela é louca. né? E ela usa essa expressão ali, ela fala assim, o governo tá gaslighting a população, né? Então, assim, como se realmente o governo tá distorcendo os fatos e escondendo a verdade ali,
Total.
e esse relacionamento abusivo aí com o governo, assim.
Total,
Muito
tem
doido.
tudo a ver. É como se aquela frase, né, que falam que uma mentira contada 1000 vezes, uma mentira contada 1000 vezes se torna uma verdade. O cara fica falando, não, 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 tá negando ali, ó, contando a mentira 1000 vezes, depois a pessoa, caraca, será que eu que sou louco? Parece que é isso que o governo, sabe, o controle faz, a engenharia do consentimento, né, que a galera faz com as pessoas. Distorce os fatos, ou seja, traz um fato mentiroso, contado trocentas mil vezes, até a pessoa, tipo, não, acho que eu tô doido mesmo, isso não é real não, sabe, tipo, mano, entendeu?
E só pela entonação da voz deles, dá pra ver que o negócio é treta, né? Que a galera tá tenso o negócio.
Uma dúvida que tu falou, gaslighting, não tem a
É.
palavra spotlight também? Spotlight é revelar, no caso?
O spotlight é tipo o que tá no destaque, assim, né? Que tá no
É trazer à tona, não é tipo... Ah, enfim, nada a ver, não é aula de inglês aqui não hoje. Enfim, continua.
Boa.
This topic to my attention. Now we'll recognize National Security Subcommittee Ranking Member Garcia for 10 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank first our witnesses for joining us today. I want to begin by thanking you all for your service to our country and for sharing your voices today and your courage to be here as well. To Mr. Graves, particularly grateful to you to spend some time that we had for you to share with candor some of your experiences, so I appreciate that as well. I do want to thank all the members of our subcommittee today and also those that are here and have waved on for their incredible interest in this issue. Particularly to Congressman Burchett, I know that your leadership has brought us to this place today, and I want to thank you for that, as well as everyone else that's been engaged in this work. I also want to thank the oversight staff, who I know has been working very hard to ensure that today's hearing is serious, that it's transparent, and that it also provides appropriate answers, as our oversight body always demands. Now, it's really important that we're here in a bipartisan way to have this conversation, which really, to the heart of it, is about national security and key to the subcommittee's core purpose. This is the subcommittee on national security of the Oversight Committee. Now, our witnesses will testify today that UAPs have posed a serious safety threat, and we must understand this. More broadly, we're dealing with real questions that get to the heart of our faith in government. Faith in our institutions, as we all know, is at an all-time low. Partisanship and alternative facts make it too easy to doubt narrative or our institutions. But this hearing will offer the public unique perspectives, building on years of reporting by both federal agencies and the independent media. Now, some of the earliest reporting on this issue was a groundbreaking 2017 New York Times report, which revealed research, as we know now, on unidentified anomalous phenomena, or as many call UFOs, by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Mr. Graves and Commander Favor's experiences with UAPs have also been documented by the public, not just by the New York Times, but CNN and many other national news outlets. Now, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence has published public reports documenting UAPs, and on June 9, 2022, NASA announced that the agency is commissioning a study to, of course, examine unidentified anomalous phenomena. Now, the sheer number of reports, whistleblowers, and stories of unidentified anomalous phenomena should raise real questions and warrant investigation and oversight, and that's why we are here today. Now, pilots have reported encounters for years. Now, because of the stigma around reporting these incidents, we still don't have a complete picture of actually what's going on, particularly as our witnesses will testify on the civilian side, and that is a real problem that we have today in the country. Now, it's very important that we show that Democrats and Republicans in Congress can come together in a bipartisan way to cut through misinformation and to look at the facts in a serious and thoughtful manner. If we are to advance oversight and public disclosure, we must also gain the broad support of the public. We will succeed getting facts out to the public faster if there is a broad public support as part of the process. Now, I understand fully the Department of Defense is hesitant to share information that could also undermine our national security by revealing information on the capabilities of our own aircraft, our sensors, and other sensitive material. At the same time, many people believe that we're withholding information from them, and that is dangerous also. I believe in openness and transparency. That is also the role of Congress. And I want to trust that the American people will be able to weigh the evidence and make up their own minds. Now, we have incidents where sensors, sometimes even multiple types of sensors, detect things that we cannot explain. UAPs, whatever they may be, may pose a serious threat to our military or civilian aircraft, and that must be understood. Now, my career and training as a longtime and career educator and teacher and researcher tell me that we should never rule anything out. We know that our space, of course, is vast and undiscovered. I also want to note that Mr. Sean Kirkpatrick, director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the component of the DoD office that investigates UAP data, has testified before the Senate this year that his unit has found no evidence of extraterrestrial activity. NASA has also stated that they don't have evidence of extraterrestrial life either, and we've heard this, of course, from some of our government agencies. And we should remind viewers and witnesses, which I think is really important, that we also cannot share classified information in public settings. But questions, of course, remain that people want to see data and information for themselves. The enormous interest in the hearing today underscores the importance of a fair and open look at the evidence from witnesses who can share their unique perspectives. Now, I know I certainly have a lot of questions, and I know that all the members of our committee do as well. We should come to this hearing with an open mind, and we should not let our existing ideas restrict us on either side. I hear over and over from many agencies the stigma around reporting and investigating UAPs prevents us from getting real answers. We know that whistleblowers have reported harassment, intimidation, or stigma as well, and this is not acceptable. If people can't report incidents which would have national security or safety implications, then that also has serious consequences for us. As ranking member of this subcommittee, I know my job would be completely impossible if whistleblowers or others feel intimidated to come before this committee. We can't be afraid of asking questions, and we can't be afraid of the truth. I'm proud to say that this hearing builds upon bipartisan work by members of the House and Senate dating many years back, which has sought to increase awareness within the Department of Defense and to mandate more of Congress of UAPs. We know the Senate is taking up an amendment to their defense authorization bill, which will create a commission with broad declassification authority, and we should all agree that that is an important step. Members of both parties and senior officials in multiple administrations have taken an interest in this issue, and we're proud to carry and build that confidence in the American people. This hearing will also not be the end of this discussion, but a new chapter and start to years and years of work that many folks, both in the public and within government, have been working on. We should encourage more reporting, not less, on UAPs. The more we understand, the safer we will be. We will hear testimony from witnesses today with a long record of service to the American people and with subject matter expertise. Our witnesses have a unique opportunity to share their perspective, insights, and their experiences with the American people. And I encourage all of my colleagues to engage with these difficult questions with an open mind and to follow the facts on behalf of our country. I also just want to say more broadly that we should look at this hearing and believe that everything is on the table as it relates to UAPs. I think an open mind is absolutely the best. I want to yield the 2.5 minutes, the remainder of my time, to the representative from Florida, Representative Moskowitz, for an opening statement. He also has been very much engaged in this issue, and I want to thank him for his leadership. Congressman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Garcia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna for their leadership in pushing this hearing forward. I want to thank obviously committee staff and their staff working on this on a bipartisan basis because many Americans are deeply interested in this issue, and it shouldn't take the potential of non-human origin to bring us together. Additionally, I want to thank the witnesses for coming forward to share your perspectives, your thoughts, and the sightings of UAPs. Unlike other hearings many times in Congress, you're not here to help a political party, but you're here to share information with the American people. And it's not something that is just going on in this administration. It's something that's spanned many administrations. For decades, many Americans have been fascinated by objects mysterious and unexplained, and it's long past time that they got some answers. The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. Those are not the words of a UFO Twitter account. Though that is a direct quote from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, that the American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. In an interview with Fox News, recent former Director of National Intelligence John Radcliffe confirmed the U.S. government is aware a lot more sightings of UAPs, and that they have not made that information public. I quote, "There are a lot more sightings that have not been made public," Radcliffe said to Fox News. For me, this hearing is about transparency. We unfortunately live in a time in which many people distrust government and our institutions. An overclassification of information away from the American public or even Congress contributes to today's politics. The American people have regular questions. What are UAPs? How come the media doesn't report more on them? Are they foreign adversaries? Are the US technical...
Às vezes dá uma traduçãozinha ali errada, né, de UAPs, botando piece de peça, mas relevem aí.
Tem alguns detalhes errados na legenda aí, gente, mas dá pra entender aí, 95% está certo a legenda.
Sim.
Technology, are they something else? They ask themselves, how come when a Russian jet shoots flares at one of our drones, we have perfect pictures and videos to show the American people and the world, but when it comes to UAPs, nothing. Of course, we must always protect our national security to maintain our superiority, like when stealth helicopters were only rumored to exist, but were used in the Osama bin Laden raid in 2011. But we can't allow that to be used as a shield to keep the American...
Não, só pra mostrar, ó, ele tá comentando sobre tecnologia secreta do governo ali, ó, tá vendo? Ele tá falando que de helicópteros que ninguém sabia que existia, e quando foram atrás do Bin Laden, do nada tinha uma tecnologia lá que ninguém conhecia desses helicópteros. Então ele já tá falando sobre tecnologia secreta do governo. Esse cara aí, ele manda várias coisas foda, velho.
Tem aquela história que falam que, tipo, a nossa tecnologia usada na sociedade é, tipo, acho que é 70 anos? É uma parada, assim, bizarra. Tipo assim, acho que é 20 anos, não sei. Sei lá, algumas décadas atrasada da militar, tá ligado? Tipo assim, quando uma tecnologia militar já tá sendo tipo, obsoleta ali e tal, eles, vamos mandar pra comercializar ali na Apple, sei lá, no mainstream ali do comércio ali, dos celulares, dos aparelhos e tal. Então, é desproporcional, tipo assim, a nossa tecnologia, você olha assim, nossa, tem um iPhone que faz e tal. Aí a tecnologia militar que não é divulgada, que não é comercializável, né, em termos assim, públicos e tal, está há 70 anos à frente da nossa hoje, 25 anos, sei lá, é uma parada assim bizarra.
E tipo assim, até nessa revolução de inteligência artificial que a gente tá aí, tem chat GPT, tem tudo, a gente fala, cara, isso aqui é revolucionário, olha o poder disso aqui. Cara, se isso tá disponível pro público, de graça, pra todo mundo.
Imagina que tem lá.
Não tem no laboratório militar lá dos russos, dos chineses, dos americanos, processador quântico e tudo. Então, assim, mano, imagina o que os caras não tem que a gente não faz nem ideia, né?
Tipo, até a questão lá da criação do computador, também da internet, todos foram criados, tipo, em momentos de guerra. Tipo assim, o cara inventou a internet na guerra, tá ligado? O cara criou o computador, aquele filme, como é que é o nome? O Jogo da Imitação, que fala do Alan Turing. O cara criou a computação para decodificar informações, sabe, do inimigo, e criou a computação, que é o computador hoje em dia. Cara, é uma loucura. Enfim, continuando.
People completely in the dark from basic truths. The American people deserve to hear more about special access programs. Congress has a right to know if there's any unsanctioned weapons development. Satellite imagery that has not been provided to Congress. Congress created the All-Domain Resolution Office in the NDAA of 2022. In its initial analysis, there are 171 uncharacterized UAP reports, and this is the words from the report, that appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. I believe more information is known about the 171 instances. It's time for Congress to reinsert ourselves. I call on our military leaders and intelligence officials to release more information to the American people about UAPs. And to our military leaders, if there's nothing to conceal, let Congress go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Dugway Proving Ground, or even Groom Lake in Nevada. We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come. Thank you, Ranking Member.
The time has begun.
Mr. Moskowitz, and
Foda, né?
now to our chairman. Thank you.
It's foda.
Right, now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He's the Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Lieutenant Graves is also a former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grush, is a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and was a senior technical advisor for UAP issues. And finally, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, squadron leader who worked as a naval aviator for 18 years. Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience known as the TikTok event.
Aí, eles aí são os brabo aí, as testemunhas ali. O Grush que lançou a braba, né? Mas, pô, os outros caras aí são...
Não, todos eles lançam altas brabas. O Grush é porque o Grush ele trabalhava no serviço de inteligência que investigava o AP, né? Então, assim, ele tem muita informação, mas todo mundo vai falar muita coisa doida aí.
O Fravor que relatou os OVNIs tic-tac, né? Que tem aquele formatinho de tic-tac, aqueles que ficam girando assim.
E esse o avistamento do Fravor que tá aí, que é piloto da Marinha, né? Acho que é isso.
Sim.
É o avistamento mais bem documentado da história. Até eles comentam isso, porque eles tinham sensores, são vários caças, assim. Então não é tipo assim, ele viu um OVNI na montanha, não. Tipo assim, ele tava no caça com vários sensores, o topo da tecnologia americana, e tipo, aí eles não sabem o que é isso, entendeu? E vários caças, então é bem documentado. Acho que, inclusive, foi um dos que o Pentágono liberou em 2017, né?
É aquele do videozinho que tem tipo, ele, what's happening, não sei o quê. E tem aquele bichinho girando, ele, tá avançando ele tá acelerando contra o vento de uma forma, em uma velocidade incrível, tipo assim, contra o vento, tá ligado? Doideira máxima.
E é tic-tac que parece um tic-tac mesmo. Por causa, literalmente, do doce.
Tem vários vídeos, pô. Tem até aqueles eles girando assim, mano, tipo, que maluquice. Enfim. Se isso não é maluquice, não sei mais o que é. O que é? Bora.
I look forward to hearing from all three of you today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands.
Eles fazendo o juramento.
Or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. We appreciate you all being here today and look forward to your testimony. We remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please try to limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, it will turn yellow, and the red light, when that comes on, tells you your 5 minutes have expired. I'll now recognize Mr. Graves for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, distinguished members of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Representatives Burchett and Luna. My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I'm a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers. And I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science.
Oh, yeah.
In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Deixa eu comentar aí rapidão. Então, só para... Cara, esse é um dos pilotos, né, que presenciou e conversa com outras pessoas, pegou alguns relatos. E uma coisa que eles frisam bastante é sobre como é unreported, né? Tipo, como poucas pessoas falam e reportam esses casos. Primeiro por medo, medo de afetar a carreira, de perder o trabalho, a perseguição que eles sofrem. Então, eles estão trazendo muito essa pauta também de, tipo assim, cara, tem muito avistamento, tá? Que ele começa falando, eles não são eventos isolados, eles são rotineiros, é muito normal ver. Não é uma pessoa aleatória que tá vendo, são pilotos treinados, não só da aeronáutica, mas também de voos comerciais, né? Então, assim, falando que é super rotineiro.
Rotineiro, os caras vê direto a parada. E eles falaram ali que, tipo assim, eles não reportam porque o próprio governo não dá, tipo, uma garantia de, tipo assim, tu vai reportar essa loucura, tu vai perder teu emprego. Eles não querem perder o emprego, sabe? Deixa eu entender isso.
E ele comenta também desse avistamento que parece que é um cubo, né? Um cubo branco, na verdade cinza escuro ou preto, com uma bola ao redor. Então, assim, já é um avistamento super bizarro. Parece que ele fala ali que cortou 2 caças do meio, né? Parece que passa meio rápido ali, não ficou claro, mas...
Eu não sei se foi a tradução ali também, bugou o áudio. Bugou o áudio aqui.
Eu não tenho certeza, mas assim, parece até que teve acidente aí, possivelmente a gente morreu nesses avistamentos, né? Então não sei.
Vamos continuar assistindo aqui.
Vale a pena a gente voltar? Não, vamos continuar, acho, né?
Acho que se eu voltar aqui eu vou perder aqui, porque o cursor aqui é um pouquinho estranho do transmissor.
Não tem volta.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members and congressmen, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country. Many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP task force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing Staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program.
Roswell.
To which I was denied access to those additional...
Pois é, ele não deixou específico se é do Roosevelt, né?
Mas fica no ar, assim, que é, tipo, de longa data, né? Que ele tá falando, é um negócio muito antigo que foi capturado com engenharia reversa, né? Tipo, olha o que ele tá falando,
que se encaixa com aquela história do Bob Lazar, já viu? Quem não viu o documentário, não sabe quem é Bob Lazar, foi um cara que relatou, né? Que teve... Ele trabalhou pro governo ali num local meio afastado das questões, assim, tipo, tipo assim, na questão mais famosa, assim, da questão dos trabalhos americanos ali no exército e tal, que a galera fala, ele trabalhou na área 51, não se sabe. Mas o Bob Lazar relatou que eles faziam engenharia reversa em uns aparelhos, e tem toda essa história que ele viu de primeira mão ali, cada um era responsável por um setor para fazer pesquisas sobre alguma coisa de engenharia reversa, sobre, sei lá, um aparelho ou qualquer outra coisa. Tem até um cabinho, não, esse já é outra coisa, esse é de Roosevelt, que eles encontraram tipo é como se fosse um pedacinho de uma nave, tá ligado? Mas não é da nave, não sei se é da nave, mas tem uns símbolos estranhos nesse cadinho, nesse pedaço de ferro, de alguma coisa. Não sei se você viu isso. Você viu isso, Dayon? Não, né?
Não sei. Eu acho que eu tava lendo nos comentários, na verdade, eu me estranho.
Mas aí outro rolê, vamos continuar aqui. Outro rolê que se encaixa com isso, né? É porque, nossa, o assunto é muito complexo, vai muita coisa.
Mas assim, só pra comentar, vocês viram que esse Mr. David Grant aí não é pouca bosta, na verdade, ele é muita bosta, o cara é muito fodão, assim, ele trouxe todo o currículo dele ali, e o cara trabalhou no serviço de inteligência por um tempão, e ele tava num nível de hierárquico bem alto, e literalmente trabalhava com investigação de UAP. Então, assim, ele trabalhava no sistema de inteligência investigando essas informações, então... É isso, só pra você ter uma base aí de quem é ele. É um cara aleatório falando.
O Bob Lazar, ele foi linchado porque, tipo assim, ele era um aleatório ali, um empregado ali do governo e tal, que relatou as questões, os eventos e tal, e foi linchado, assim, tipo, pelo público. Esse cara é maluco e tal. E a história dele nunca foi, tipo assim, controversa, nunca foi. Sempre...
E pra quem não sabe... desculpa.
Pode falar.
E pra quem não sabe o que é engenharia reversa, é basicamente quando você tem uma tecnologia que você não sabe como ela funciona, aí você fica pesquisando ela e fazendo a engenharia reversa para você entender o princípio dela.
Desmontando
você poder
ela.
compreender essa tecnologia e poder replicar ela e criar ela, né? É você pegar uma coisa que você não compreende e ficar pesquisando. E é isso que eles estão relatando.
É basicamente como se você pegasse uma nave, mas faz uma comparação aí com, sei lá, um carrinho de controle remoto, e você, como que isso funciona? Quem é que, criança, tipo, abriu teu carrinho de controle remoto, foi ver os motorzinhos, as coisas lá, como é que funciona e tal. Eu fiz muito isso. Isso é um pouco de engenharia reversa. Você desconstruir uma coisa que está construída para você ver as peças de como aquilo é montado, sabe? É mais ou menos isso.
On the data I collected to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, Congresswomen. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that has been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb.
Que doideira.
Continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested.
Que loucura, hein?
What's shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Keane, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they're from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it or not, from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate. And this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know it's very difficult for all of
Um
you.
comentário.
Comentários.
Não, só
Cada sessão ali de testemunha é bom dar uma pausa e um comentário, né?
acho que quando tiver comentário pertinente a gente comenta, assim.
Sim.
Meio pra não ficar travando muito, mas é bons comentários.
Sim.
Mas assim, só pra quem é cético e não acredita e fala assim, isso é cortina de fumaça, não tem ET, tipo assim, isso é mentira, né? A pessoa não acredita. Cara, não é um pouco suspeito tudo isso que tá acontecendo ao ponto de, tipo assim, 171 avistamentos americanos, o report americano lá é tipo assim, tinha um voo esquisito. Tipo assim, só tem isso de informação, só tem isso de detalhe. É como se os caras não querem investigar. Tipo, cara, a gente sabe muito bem que o americano é super noiado com essas coisas militares, ainda mais se tratando de voo e avião e céu, né? Então, assim, eles cuidam muito do espaço aéreo deles. Aí, do nada, eles veem um negócio que voa a sei lá quantos 1000 quilômetros por hora, que faz um absurdo lá, aí eles, tipo assim, isso aí não é relevante, isso aí não vamos investigar. Tipo, cara, no mínimo é um pouco absurdo e bizarro eles não investigarem isso. Então já é suspeito por si só, sabe? Então, pra quem não acredita, cara, pensa nisso, entendeu? Tipo...
É suspeito por si só eles não estudarem isso, tendo tanta tecnologia que os Estados Unidos têm, né? Ele tem, tipo... Mano, os Estados Unidos é o que tem mais satélites em órbita, é o que tem mais radiotelescópios, né? Não, é loucura. Tipo assim, não vamos investigar isso. Tem um tic-taczinho ali que voa a 300 milhões de quilômetros por hora e... Não, de boa, pô, é só uma... Mano, impossível, é tipo contraditório.
Parece aqueles filmes de gente alienada, assim, que a galera tá dormindo, assim, tipo...
Chega a ser risível, tipo, por isso que eles estão fazendo essas audiências, é tipo um disclosure mesmo, tipo, em etapas, porque, tipo...
Chega a ser óbvio, pelo menos que eles disfarçassem um pouco, né? Vamos investigar. Não, tipo assim, eles não investigam. Tipo, chega a ser idiota o negócio, né?
Tu já viu o Stephen Greer? Ele é o brabão dos disclosures. Ele tem até um documentário que o nome é Unacknowledger, que ele fala umas coisas, mano, que é tudo isso que a gente tá falando aqui, sabe? E que essa audiência já está falando aí. Ele já tá falando, tipo, há muito tempo. Ele fala que, tipo assim, beleza. Tem naves que são de outra espécie, outro tipo de tecnologia que a gente não consegue deduzir de onde é, tipo, dando exemplo esse do Tic Tac. E tem algumas naves que você olha que são aquelas clássicas, que tipo, né, aquele disquezinho que voa e tal, que pode ser também nós que pegamos essa engenharia reversa, estávamos tentando, né, tipo, sei lá, reproduzir isso, controlar isso de alguma forma. Que eu acho que isso é um detalhe mais profundo até, que eles não falam, tipo assim, não, a gente tem naves, eles não falaram isso. Mas eles falaram que... Enfim, vamos continuar vendo aqui.
Só um comentário para finalizar, mas o Bob Lazar fala sobre isso, né? Quando ele dá o depoimento dele, ele fala que nas bases militares eles já tinham conseguido fazer engenharia reversa de algumas naves, e eles conseguiam ligar algumas naves. E tinha piloto humano pilotando OVNI, assim, tipo assim, que eles levantavam voo na base americana e faziam testes. E, tipo, o Bob Lazar fala que ele ia lá com os amigos dele de trailer e ficava lá tomando cerveja e assistindo, entendeu?
Mano, imagina. Tu já viu aquele filme clássico, né? Aquele Dia da Independência, Independence Day?
Cara, eu sei que é um clássico, mas se duvidar eu não assisti.
Meu Deus, eu amo esse filme, pô. Enfim, é aquela... Como é que fala? Aquela narrativa americana de, tipo, que se os ETs vierem aqui, eles querem nos destruir, terraformar o planeta pra tomar o planeta, que são os ETs parasitas, né, que é, tipo, amplamente divulgado por Hollywood. Só depois, tipo, uns anos pra cá, né, depois, sei lá, de 2014, 13, 2012 pra cá, depois, sei lá, dessas paradas, fizeram esses filmes, tipo, mais transcendentais sobre a questão do ET. Por exemplo, um filme bom é o The Arrival, né, A Chegada,
Obrigado.
que eles tratam a questão científica sobre a linguagem, a comunicação. Mano, é absurdo esse filme. Tem um filme também que é UFO, que é a sigla que foi substituída por WAP, né? Que é de 2018, que é com a protagonista lá do Arquivo X. Mano, esse filme é perfeito, tipo, sobre essa questão científica de identificar OVNIs e tal. Enfim, mas o que eu queria falar do filme da Independence Day é que lá no filme eles mostram que tem uma base, uma área 51, né? Que até é porque eu assisti um dia desse. Quer dizer, eu já assisti esse filme várias vezes, porque eu gosto pra caramba, né? E lá no filme eles falam assim: o presidente fala, não existe negócio de área 51. Aí um cara do alto escalão ali do governo fala, não, presidente, não é bem assim. Aí eles vão lá pra área 51 e tem eles fazendo engenharia reversa numa nave. E eles pegam a nave, controlam a nave e, tipo, conseguem destruir a nave do ZT lá com a nave deles mesmo, tá ligado? Tipo, é uma doideira. Enfim, continuando.
Bora.
Eu tô falando dos filmes, é porque, né, eu e o Dayon, a gente, pelo menos a galera, assim, eu sei que os filmes, eles passam verdades. Hollywood, sei lá, roteiristas que vão lá conseguem passar um roteiro, um projeto de um filme, os caras são, muito além, eles querem passar uma mensagem, tem a questão da indústria, né, da mídia, ganhar dinheiro e tal, Hollywood, mas também tem a questão da mensagem, tipo assim, pô, eles vão passar algo amplamente divulgado no mundo inteiro, então vamos jogar nas entrelinhas ali uma questão para mudar a consciência, mudar o paradigma, eu acredito muito nisso.
E tem... eu não sei se a gente tá comentando muito, mas enfim, é só pra adicionar, tem um filme, inclusive, que tem muitas verdades ocultas mesmo nos filmes, tem muita coisa transcendental, assim, se a gente for parar pra analisar, e tem um filme que eu acho que tem muita informação transcendental, que é Paul, o Alien Fugitivo.
Já vi, é engraçado esse filme. Mas é muito da hora.
É um filme de comédia idiota, que os caras estão fumando com alienígena e falando bobagem, e é um filme de comédia que você não leva a sério. Você fala assim, os caras chapados com ET, entendeu? Mas, se você leva a sério esse filme, você começa a prestar atenção no que eles estão falando, o filme fica muito doido. E uma das coisas que o Paul, que é o alienígena, ele explica, ele fala que muitas coisas que estão no cinema, que estão mostrando essas imagens,
sim.
Tá assistindo, elas estão para criar sinapses do nosso cérebro, para criar essa referência. Mesmo que você não acredite, seja cético, ele tá criando essa sinapse no teu cérebro, e isso ajuda no momento que for ter a revelação, você já tá meio que preparado para isso, já vai mastigando isso, né?
Sim.
Ele fala várias coisas ocultas lá, mas sobre a sétima arte, o cinema, então é muito interessante.
Sim, eu já vi. Quando eu vi esse filme, eu vi sem pretensão nenhuma. Quando eu assisti, caramba, tem umas mensagens ali braba, hein? Enfim, continuando.
To try to illuminate this issue. Call on myself first for some questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Graves. Are pilots that you interact with as part of your organization, do you feel adequately trained and briefed on how to handle encounters with UAPs?
No. Right now, military witnesses to UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that military has implemented. The military and Department of Defense has stated that UAP represent a critical aviation safety risk. We have not seen that same language being used in the commercial markets. They are not acknowledging this risk.
Okay, what steps do you think you have to be taken to improve a pilot's UAP reporting, be it military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs.
Right.
There is a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check. So having a secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce the concerns that aircrew have.
Could you just give me a little idea of the degree to which reports in the past are not made public right now?
Well, I don't think there has been a proper reporting system to gather those reports and thus not report them. So to answer your question, I think there is a dearth of data due to the fact that the reporting has been limited up to this time.
Could you tell me why you believe it's, kind of play the devil's advocate, a reason why some of this stuff should not be available to the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns when we use our advanced sensors in our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves would be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification guideline actually spells out the different nuances of how this topic is classified from the perspective of UAP, not national security.
I'll give you a follow-up on that. Assuming that there are reasons why not all this should be made public, this has been around for a long period of time. Can any of the three of you think of any reason why anything related to UAPs, say 15 years and back, should not be immediately made public?
Ó. A braba.
I think one of it is acknowledging a vulnerability, both from a collection and I'll just say a countermeasure perspective. So it's that we haven't cracked for many years. Yeah.
Even say 20 years back. Is there any reason why, when you go back that far, things shouldn't be made public?
Unless it shows a specific national security vulnerability as it relates to a weakness in particular defense system.
Okay, Mr. Fravor, the TikTok incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
None. We had a standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, the admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Did your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I was the commanding officer of the squadron, so no.
O cara era o
Incident,
top
the
de lá.
UAP event that you encountered while you were a pilot?
Yes, it was.
Okay. This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had.
Olha.
And you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Que loucura. Espaço-tempo. Controle do espaço-tempo aí.
I would also like to add, from a commercial aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional actions. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. And so when we have unidentified targets and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or a fear of what it could be, that's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
What steps should be taken to better understand and respond to UAP encounters in the interest of national security?
There needs to be a location where this information is centralized for processing, and there needs to be a two-way communication loop so the operators on the front end have a feedback and can get best practices on how to process information, what to do, and to ensure that their reporting is being listened to. Right now, there is not a lot of back and forth.
Mr. Grush, in your complaint to the intelligence community inspector general, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs but not sharing it with intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Garcia.
Comentário rapidinho.
Again, thank you all for
Então, só uma coisa pra gente perceber, mas talvez vão ter várias perguntas que às vezes parece óbvio que eles estão falando e às vezes até repetitivo, tipo, mas por que vocês não reportam? Mas por que vocês não reportam? Você se sente seguro em reportar? Você acha que isso é um risco à segurança nacional? Tem algumas coisas que eles repetem e às vezes é óbvio. Isso é por uma questão legal de eles estarem nessa reunião, nesse comitê, tá? Então eles estão sob juramento, então tudo que eles estão falando ali tem um peso legal para o Congresso poder se posicionar e agir politicamente em relação a isso, tá? Então, às vezes são coisas que eles já falaram 1000 vezes em várias entrevistas, em vários relatos, mas aí tem um peso legal. Então, por isso que às vezes eles estão fazendo essas perguntas só para estar anotado lá na ata e falar, o cara falou aqui em juramento, então a gente pode tomar essa ação, sabe? Então, só um comentário aí pra galera saber.
Sim, sim. Uma coisa que ele falou ali também é que precisa-se criar uma forma de relatar esses fenômenos. Porque às vezes é algo tão anômalo, a experiência cotidiana de um piloto, sei lá, que o cara não consegue nem relatar. Então ele precisa de um sistema ali, de controle de feedback, de como agir em tal situação. Porque, cara, imagina, você tá lá num caça high-tech, última tecnologia que você conhece aqui da Marinha Americana, do planeta, com todos os sensores infinitos que existem. Aí aparece um outro, uma coisa, um fenômeno, né? Uma nave que você, mano, como é que pode? Isso aqui é de que país? Tá me espionando? cara viaja milhares de quilômetros em um segundo e eu não vejo mais ele, tipo, sendo que o meu, tipo, tá no top da tecnologia, enfim, aí buga a mente do cérebro do piloto e tal. Por isso que eles têm medo de relatar essas coisas, porque, tipo assim, sei lá, tô doido? Maluquice, né? Enfim, continuando.
E eu vi até uns comentários na internet do pessoal falando, isso aí é tecnologia chinesa e russa, e os americanos não querem afirmar que estão para trás na tecnologia, não existe ET. Tipo, tá o piloto ali, o cara especialista nisso, tipo, e ele tá falando, cara, isso aqui tá anos na nossa frente de tecnologia. Ele vai pro espaço e volta, assim, questão de segundos, entendeu? Tipo, não tem russo, não tem chinês, não existe isso, entendeu? A gente tá criando foguete agora que custa sair do planeta, entendeu? E o negócio brinca ali, vai pra lá e pra cá, entendeu? Faz curvas que não faz sentido,
Sim,
então...
o Elon Musk. Inclusive,
bem claro.
Inclusive...
É bem além da tecnologia humana, é isso.
Sim, sim. Inclusive o Elon Musk tweetou, né? Como é que ele tinha tweetado? Eu disse que aliens não existe, but... Aí ele colocou uns pontinhos assim, né?
Não tô falando que ET existe, mas...
O Elon Musk sabe, pô, não é possível. O cara, tipo, trabalha com a NASA ali na SpaceX. Enfim.
O cara vende foguete pra NASA. Bora.
Service and for testifying today. Want to just talk about UAPs as it relates to what we're seeing in pilots' interaction with UAPs. Particularly, Mr. Graves, one of the, I think, concerns from members of this committee is this idea that pilots, there's no system to actually report UAPs and the stigma around pilots. And so can you just briefly, you mentioned you're working with 30 pilots right now that have had encounters with UAPs, but you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those that you're currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down in two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with their other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal first-hand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences, both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the eastern seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in the notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they are reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send this to.
And let me just add, both to Mr. Fravor as well as Mr. Graves, not having this system for reporting, would you both agree that it's harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
I think it's actually a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate. You know, so if you took the East Coast, you know, there's coastal radars out there that monitor our air defense identification zone, so out to 200 miles. They can track these, you know, so when you see them, they could actually go and pull that data and get maneuvering. And instead of just having the airplanes, there's other data sources out there. And I've talked to other government officials on this. So you need a centrally located repository that these reports go to. So if you just stuck it in DOD, you wouldn't get anything out of the Intelligence Committee because they have a tendency not to talk. But if you had a central location where these reports would come in, not just military, but also commercial aviation, because there's a lot of that going on, especially if you talk to anyone that flies from here to Hawaii. Over the Pacific, they see odd lights. So I think you need to develop something that allows you a central point to collect the data in order to investigate.
Mr. Graves?
I would concur with everything Mr. Fravor said. I'll continue to say that the commercial pilots that have reached out to me through Americans for Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests and what may be classified or not. But I think there has to be some sort of system, and so that's something that I hope can be an outcome that this committee can work on. Is there anything else for the two of you briefly beyond this reporting system that you think that we can do as a government to encourage and facilitate more civilian reporting?
I think we're doing it right now.
Okay,
I
great.
think this hearing is going to show the American people that their government takes this topic seriously.
And how about civilians that may not be pilots? What kind of process could be in place for civilians who are not pilots, who may have UAP encounters? Do either of you have any suggestions that could facilitate that?
My recommendations would be to make that a sensor-centric operation in order to make it as objective as possible.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Favor?
No, I agree with Mr. Graves on that.
Okay. Just briefly, I also just want to note, particularly for the two pilots, and I have a question for Mr. Grush. One of the things that I found fascinating in our discussion, Mr. Graves, last night as well, is that you both described UAPs and formations and the way they are observed in space or in our air, and the way that they move is essentially ways in which current technology or aircraft that we know of are unable to actually function or move. And so will you just, for the public record, again, once again, briefly just either describe or note that aircraft that are being witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that you're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today and the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Favor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. And that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Favor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know that you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Gresh, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions are important questions, and I look forward to being involved in the process to get those answered. I know there'll be a lot of questions from other committee members, so I yield back.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Burchett himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I would like to have you on my legislation to do just that. On the reporting, and we'll get together.
Manda baraba.
Então, é porque vocês vão ver que eles vão começar a entrar, porque tem essas informações que são confidenciais e as não confidenciais, tá? E principalmente esse David Grunch, ele tem muito acesso a informações confidenciais que elas não podem ainda vir a público, né? Então eles vão começar a fazer umas perguntas muito avançadas daqui a pouco, e ele realmente não vai poder falar, porque isso envolve questões legais, que envolve o risco com outras pessoas também que compartilharam essas informações com ele, né? Então tem muita coisa que ele não pode responder em público. Ele até fala, cara, lá no cantinho, lá na salinha eu conto pra vocês, mas aqui eu não vou poder falar. Então, assim, aqui o que eles estão falando, o que eles estão mostrando nessa reunião é o que é não classificado, mas eles já têm conhecimento de muitas coisas, né? O próprio David Grunch fala assim, tipo, eles têm UAPs, eles têm OVNIs capturados, e ele fala, com certeza, por 40 pessoas que eu entrevistei, eu sei até os locais, os locais que tem, entendeu?
Uhum.
Então, assim, enfim, só um comentário aí mais sobre a reunião e bora.
Ele tá totalmente preparado. Tipo assim, você quer provas? Eu tenho todas as provas. Aqui, ó, tem 40 relatos com pessoas, tipo assim, com a intenção de divulgar isso de forma organizada, científica e tal. Mais ou menos isso. Continuando.
Sponsor on that. That'd be really cool. Thank you for those great questions. Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach.
Velocidade supersônica, hein? Não, só pra falar que, tipo, galera, quem tá gostando da live, dá um like aí, divulga, compartilha, que ajuda bastante aqui o canal, que tá, tipo... O canal foi pego pela Matrix, vocês sabem o que aconteceu aí, né, e tal. Fortalece aí quem tá gostando do conteúdo, quem tá gostando desse react, quem tá gostando desse tipo de vídeo. Vou começar a fazer vídeos ao vivo, que é melhor, é mais dinâmico, é mais rápido de eu produzir um conteúdo pra vocês. E quem tá gostando aí, dá um like, comenta aí, tamo junto. Continuando.
And they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay. Have you spoken to commercial and military pilots that have seen these off of our East Coast?
I have.
Okay. Mr. Favor, I noticed that in the Tic Tac video, it's Tic Tac like the candy, not TikTok like the Chinese Communist app.
That's correct.
Yes, sir. I just want to make that.
É TikTok, mano. É TikTok. O cara confundiu TikTok com TikTok, tá ligado? Que doideira.
TikTok, sim.
Daughter corrected me on that and called me a boomer.
Tá, se tu quiser fazer umas piadinhas aí, tá? Pra galera rir. Que é uma parada tão séria. Tô zoando.
Sim.
And said, hey, boomer. And I said, no, baby, it's Tic Tac like the candy. You're going to have to just look it up. And but now I would also like to say today is a day of many firsts. It's a miracle that we're having this meeting, and it's also a miracle that my wife has put up with me for 9 years today. Today is my anniversary, so I want to tell my wife happy anniversary and that I love her very much. As she likes to say, this 9 years have been the best 2 years of her life. So thank you. Mr. Favor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac, very briefly?
The performance. Absolute performance. It was...
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
É, porque é uma questão tecnológica também, né? Tipo, não é, o cara é brabo, dirige a parada. Não, mano, é tipo, é uma nave ultra avançada, muito mais avançada, sabe?
Não, tem até uma parada que eles falam ali, que é o fato das naves dele, esses OVNIs conseguirem parar no ar, né? Então não é só a questão de voar rápido ou fazer curva. É o fato de parar. A gente não tem nada que voe e para. Pode até ser um helicóptero, na verdade, o helicóptero para, na verdade. Mas eles não têm hélice, eles não têm sistema de propulsão. Eles, tipo assim, e tá num vento, entendeu? O cara falou assim, cara, tá ventando super forte, o negócio tá, tipo, parado no ar, assim. Tipo...
É, uma das, tipo assim, um dos pilares de difícil, tipo assim, ser removido, né? Eu ia falar pilar não, mas a barreira tecnológica é conseguir vencer a inércia ali da gravidade da Terra, essas coisas. Mano, é muito difícil. Tem que ter uma tecnologia quântica, sabe? A nível quântico, assim, ó. Nível de você conseguir anular a gravidade da Terra pra você fazer tipos de manobras que, tipo, a gravidade da Terra não tá influenciando a sua nave, o seu aparelho. Então é uma coisa muito avançada, tá ligado?
Realmente é propulsão gravitacional, né?
Sim.
O Bob Lazar já falava disso.
Sim.
Platforms that track the report of the Tic Tac's maneuvers, maybe the NORAD
TikTok.
system or any of the others.
Zoeira.
Mr. Grush, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you all very much. Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything along these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. As they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would think that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential
Que doideira, hein?
skiff, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the skiff, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario. Mr. Favor, do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone. So there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the same object though that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared.
Caraca, eu não vi essa parte.
Você saiu, mas só rapidão, só pra comentar. Ele comentou que no dia que eles estavam voando, o céu tava azul, tava tudo limpo e não tinha onda no mar, não tinha nada. Só que ele falou que tinha uma mancha branca na água. Talvez como se tivesse alguma coisa mexendo, borbulhando a água, não sei, uma espuma na água, não ficou claro. Então ali ele tá falando que não era o tic-tac que tava gerando esse efeito na água. Parecia que tinha uma outra nave invisível, ou talvez embaixo da água, alguma outra coisa que também eles estão vendo. E depois que o tic-tac vai embora e some, a mancha branca no mar também some. Né?
Tipo um fenômeno ali no mar, né? Tipo...
e ele falou que era bem nítido, assim, porque tava, tipo assim, o mar azul, o céu azul e, tipo, tem uma mancha branca, assim. Tipo, era bem claro, assim, a visão, né?
Tipo uma mancha branca, tipo, de volume de onda, né? De água, assim.
Não sei se...
Não
talvez
sabe,
uma
né?
espuma, uma onda agitando ali, não sei direito, né? Não fica claro.
Caralho, eu não vi essa parte aí. React ao vivo aqui. Que doideira, mano.
Tipo, a hora que você saiu ali.
Cara, acho que deve aparecer tantas coisas, assim, que os caras ficam, tipo, mano... A gente tem que divulgar isso aqui, que daqui a pouco, mano, o que é isso aqui, tá ligado?
É muito doideira.
Doideira.
During viewing of when there were some people chasing some of these objects, did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapons system?
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it spit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any of our enemies that have that capability?
No.
Okay, I would also like...
Ele falou nossos inimigos? Foi isso mesmo? Que doideira.
Sim. Não, os inimigos ele tá falando das outras nações, né? Acho que China, Rússia...
Então, inimigo, tipo, que doideira.
Ele já trata como inimigo mesmo, né? Tipo, é doideira mesmo. Não sei quem que...
Hã?
Não sei qual país que ele quer se referir, né? Mas já tá mandando inimigos ali na mesa.
Então, tipo, isso que eu fiquei... Oxi, que doideira.
Like George Knapp breaking Area 51, he's the reason I knew about that. And the Tic Tacs is Leslie Keane from New York Times article, and I would encourage everybody to read that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back to you for no time.
Very good. Mr. Raskin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Graves, you reported UAP encounters during training flights, I think, and have since come forward to warn the Pentagon that these encounters may be putting pilots at risk. My first question is, you've identified these as taking place on the East Coast. Is it just on the East Coast where these encounters have been reported?
No. Since the events initially occurred, I've learned that the objects have been detected essentially where all operations, Navy operations are being conducted across the world. And that's from the All-Domain Anomaly Resolutions Office reporting.
All right, can you describe your experience after you decided to come forward and go public with your experience?
Certainly. Like many others, in 2017, I saw the New York Times article come out as well. And for me, it was special because I recognized the voices on the video. I recognized the video itself. I had seen it when it was taken. I seen it when it was debriefed. And so that was kind of shook me because I realized that this problem was still ongoing. And so I reached out to colleagues back on the East Coast and realized that this was still a safety risk that they were dealing with, that they had essentially hit a wall with how they could move forward on this conversation. It was at that point when I decided to try to move the conversation forward myself.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots, and can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Mano, que doideira isso aí, mano.
É um cubo preto dentro de uma bola transparente, mano. Tipo, tenta visualizar isso, tipo assim, voando no céu, assim, tipo...
Um cubo preto dentro de uma bola transparente. Tipo, mano, que porra é essa? Geometria sagrada? Tipo... Não, eu vi uma imagem que fizeram renderizada, né, em 3D desse relato aí, né, não?
Você viu? Eu queria ver, eu acabei não vendo, mas se tiver aí pra colocar depois...
tem que ver no Google aí e tal, se eu não posso sair aqui da janela, né, que vai dar aquele bug.
Então tá bom.
Mas enfim, cubo transparente com uma bola, mano, que doideira, né?
Inside of a clear sphere, where the
Sacred geometry.
of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere, And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years. And as far as I know, it's still occurring.
So I take it that you're arguing what we need is real transparency in a reporting system so we can get some clarity on what's going on out there, because there are many pilots in your situation, but we should have a way of developing a systematic inventory of all of such encounters. Is that right?
Yes, and I think we need both transparency and the reporting. We have the reporting, but we need to make sure that information can be promulgated to commercial aviation as well as the rest of the populace.
Mr. Grush, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off.
Olha aí, tá vendo? Que doideira isso, tipo, não, você não vai reportar essas coisas no meu setor porque, sabe, tem todo esse jogo de hierarquia também, mano, de controle, né?
E o cara tá botando a carreira dele, o nome dele em jogo, tipo assim, imagina, o cara tá lá no alto hierarquia, ganhando um salário, uma qualidade de vida irada, e ele vai perder tudo isso, colocar tudo isso em jogo pra falar sobre OVNI, tipo... O cara prefere ficar quieto e ficar ganhando bem, entendeu?
Tipo, mano, eu sei que é real, mas vou ficar de boa. Esse não... É doideira, hein? Curiosidade, se fosse você, tá ligado? No lugar desses caras, você ia agir como? Mano, eu ia, sei lá, ia tacar o foda-se e falar, mano, é real, perdi meu emprego aí, ó, tá vendo? Sei lá, mano, eu ia ser não sei se é uma questão de ser Marte, né? De morrer por uma causa, mas, pô, trazer a verdade, pô. Pelo menos a minha família, a galera, ia acreditar em mim e ia salvar o povo da ignorância, pelo menos ali, os próximos. Pensa assim, não ia pensar no dinheiro.
O Bob Lazar fala sobre isso, e ele fala que, tipo assim, as pessoas que tentam ocultar essas informações, eles começam a perseguir você e fuder a tua vida de várias formas, pra você não se sentir mais seguro, não se sentir mais bem, você começa a ficar meio paranoia, mas eles meio que não te matam, eles não vão te exterminar, porque isso seria pior ainda, né? A notícia ia bombar daí, né? Tipo, o cara foi assassinado do nada, entendeu? Então eles ficam meio que fazendo esse terrorismo administrativo, entendeu?
Sim, ele deu esse nome, né? Ele não quis falar de outra forma.
Ele fala desse jeito. E o Bob Lazar falou que chegavam a, tipo, às vezes não só perseguir ele, mas perseguia, tipo, a família dele, os amigos dele, pra fuder a vida dele, tipo, a rede dele, sabe? Tipo, amigo perdi emprego.
Sim, é uma queimação geral, assim, tipo, da imagem da pessoa, né? Tipo, vamos zoar ele em todos os lugares pra todo mundo achar que ele é doido. Mano, maluquice.
Pode todas as conexões do cara, é muito foda.
Vai ficar gravada assim a live, tá, Ellen? Vai estar aqui pra sempre.
Vai estar disponível no canal, na aba ao vivo lá, tá? Não em vídeo, galera. Sim, ao vivo ele tá lá.
Boa. Inclusive, se inscreve no canal do Dayon depois, Synapses.x. Você é um infiltrado da SpaceX, né, Dayon?
Na verdade, o Elon Musk me copiou.
Vamos lá, continua.
But I'm here to represent those people. So.
Mr. Fravor, what about you? What has your experience been since you've come forward with your perspective on this?
Actually, I've been treated very well. And the 6 people that were involved, myself included, all of them have or will be retiring from the military as 05s or 06s. And all my friends that are very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them, they believe they understand there's a problem. But no, I was actually treated really well.
And what is your general interpretation of these phenomena, or what is your current thinking of trying to make sense of them?
Well, I'll say, I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me. But I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing. We have nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy.
Deve ser muito foda.
Just an incredible technology.
Muito massa.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'll yield back to you.
Thanks. On to Ms. Luna.
Mr. Grush, in speaking to you yesterday, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
Retroengenharia.
On that, I'm not sure.
Engenharia
Have
reversa.
you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Aero, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over Aero in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of Aero.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that, though, mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you. So it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and/or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically there that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on, as well as Representative Burchett, with the FAA, to your understanding, pilots that are seeing this, commercial airline pilots, are they receiving cease and desist letters from corporations for coming forward with information in regards to safety for potential airline passengers?
I have been made privy to conversations with commercial aviators who have received cease and desist orders.
So the American public should know that corporations are putting their own reputations on the not the line, but ahead of the safety of the American people. And I think, would you agree with that statement?
It appears so.
Okay. And I guess this would be my last, I'm out of time. I yield. I'll be back.
I'll be back. Pausa rapidão.
Thank you, Mr.
Não,
Chairman.
só duas coisas ali, porque ela tá falando que dos voos comerciais, né, que os pilotos estão tendo avistamento e isso influencia na segurança, né? Tem uma coisa voando a 60 mil km por hora do lado do avião e tem 300 pessoas no avião, né? E os pilotos não estão reportando isso, entendeu? Tipo, as pessoas estão voando por aí com a sua segurança em risco e eles não podem reportar sobre isso, né? Tipo, tanto é que eles falam de cessar e desistir, né? Tipo assim, não vai falar sobre isso, fica quieto aí e vai pilotar teu avião, entendeu? E outra coisa também que ele fala sobre o avistamento de um objeto do tamanho de um campo de futebol, né? Tipo assim...
Pois é, eu vi isso aí. Tipo...
Imagina o tamanho.
Que doideira. Depende se daí real.
Sim.
Tem coisa assim que eu fico, mano... Sei lá, velho. É doideira. Vamos lá.
Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Favor, I heard you talk about speed.
Rapidão. O pessoal falou do efeito aí que tá em volta da câmera aí, que tá atacando o TDAH deles aí. Não sei se você quer desativar esse efeito ou manter ele. Acho que tira então, vamos deixar sem então, porque talvez fique muito... Tá mais calmo agora. Pronto.
When those objects broke
Bugou meu
the
microfone,
sound
foi mal.
barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
Força G.
Acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile of the Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's, some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs. So I'll use Title 10, so DOD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight of SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the Gang of Eight is at least supposed to be notified if a waived or wave-bigoted, unacknowledged SAP is created, and that's public law.
Well, so that how does, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
Olha isso.
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds. And,
Does that mean that there is money in the budget that is
Área 51, truth.
and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Okay. Satellite.
Rapidinho.
Let's talk about.
Cara, esse cara aí, ele faz umas perguntas muito foda, e vocês estão vendo o nível da conversa. E ele tá perguntando ali como é que é financiado esses projetos, essas pesquisas. E ele fala sobre, através de um negócio chamado IRAD, que é tipo o Instituto de Pesquisa e Desenvolvimento. E ele fala que elas são financiadas basicamente com desvio de verba do governo, né? E ele tá falando também sobre AT, que é Advanced Technologies, né? Então é aquilo que eu falei dos helicópteros lá, que são tecnologias avançadas que o governo tem, que ele pesquisa, e também as não sancionadas, então que elas não foram aprovadas pelo governo, assim, tipo, os caras estão desenvolvendo em segredo lá, tecnologias avançadas que nem o Congresso sabe. E ele tá falando, não, sim, existe, tipo...
Que doideira.
Beleza, tá ligado? Tipo...
O loucão aqui dos filmes, das referências. Tem outro filme também que é bastante famoso, que eu, inclusive, amo esse filme, é aquele Impacto Profundo, que durante a investigação da jornalista lá para saber, tipo, que projeto é esse do governo que vocês estão ocultando, que desvio de verba é esse? É um spoiler gigante, tá? Mas quando a jornalista vai entrevistar o próprio presidente, ele fala, não, a gente está desviando, né, a verba ali para esse projeto aqui para salvar a humanidade. Tipo assim, é outro contexto e tal, mas no filme eles colocaram de uma forma bem assim congruente a questão de, tipo assim, de desviar a verba para uma coisa e dar um outro nome pra ser difícil de ser rastreado, sabe? Então, tipo, mano, que doideira. O cara falando isso aqui é quase a comprovação do filme.
Não, é absurdo, é muito absurdo. É coisa de filme, é literalmente essa reunião.
Sim, você tinha dito, essa reunião é uma coisa de filme, assim, contexto de filme.
Sim. Bora.
Filme da vida real, né?
Baseado em fatos reais.
Baseado em fatos reais.
We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately.
Tá vendo? O cara também é formado em física. O cara não é pouca bosta, igual você tinha dito.
E o cara falou que ele viu uns negócios sinistros lá e, tipo, nem ele consegue explicar.
Pela física, enfim.
I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you've spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay.
Volta ali.
Do you have...
Não posso discutir isso
Mas aqui a legenda traduziu errado, mas ele fala crash sites, que são, tipo, lugares de
queda.
Que caiu nave, né? Que crashou. Então ele tá falando assim que são imagens de satélite que tem informação sigilosa, que eles não têm acesso. Ele tá perguntando, isso é de crash site? Tipo, de onde caiu a nave? Ele, não posso responder.
Que maluquice, velho.
Muito foda.
The truth is real.
Any information that the U.S. government is
involved
in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Okay. I'll yield the balance of my time back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Cara, muito foda.
Da hora, né?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ao mesmo tempo que é da hora, é tipo, tu fica, mano, isso tá acontecendo mesmo? Tá ligado? Tipo, mano, que doideira. O que a galera tá achando aí da live? KKKKK, tem uma galera aí falando, what the fuck?
Tem um comentário aqui falando que essa nave Tic-Tac foi também avistada por chineses e tem relato, tem tudo e tal.
Então, essa foi até aquela questão que eu disse no início dos avistamentos dos WAPs Tic-Tac, que eles pensaram que era um balão chinês, mas na verdade eles também viram e pensaram que era americano, sei lá, sabe? Uma parada de espionagem de outro lugar. Mano, doideira. Bora.
I thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Garouche, in your sworn testimony, you state that the United States government has retrieved supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft and other UAP-related artifacts.
Roosevelt.
So far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. Several other former military and intelligence officials have come forward with similar allegations, albeit in non-public settings. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to Arrow thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to Arrow that I also interviewed,
Okay.
and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay.
I was able to evaluate
Okay,
that information.
I need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is accurate, came from a direct quote. And this contradiction is a perfect example of why we need to inject transparency into our government. And for another example, look no further than the pitiful response to the Chinese spy balloon debacle earlier this year.
Aí, ó.
You may remember the mass confusion that ensued when the balloon was first spotted over Montana, 4 days after it first entered U.S. airspace over Alaska. The Biden administration's initial inability to address the object grew into a continuous series of embarrassments. After news of the balloon reached the mainstream media, we were assured that the balloon posed no threat to our security. However, after the balloon was allowed to transit the entire continental United States, fighter jets were scrambled off the coast of South Carolina to shoot it down. This
Caralho.
flip-flopping and obfuscation caused needless confusion, fear, and panic across the country. It's my hope,
Caramba,
Mr.
que doideira, não sabia
Chairman,
disso.
that this sort of confusion will not be repeated. We should investigate the extent to which elements of our government possess or do not possess information that is of critical value to the American people. We owe it to the citizens of this nation to make sure that our government is transparent and accountable. We must make sure that our government provides answers, and Congress must do its duty to solicit those answers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2022, NASA announced that it was commissioning an independent study team to examine UAPs. The NASA team is comprised of scientists across different fields, as well as former astronauts and pilots. In May, the independent study team held its first public meeting, which included the perspectives from NASA senior leaders, as well as perspectives from the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies. The NASA study team is also expected to release its first report pretty soon, and I think it's safe to say that we all eagerly await its results. Mr. Graves, how might NASA's research influence the commercial industry regarding safety in UAP?
I think NASA has a big role to play as far as commercial aviation safety, and it's one of their original charges as an organization. One of the recommendations that have been put forward is to utilize their existing aviation safety reporting system to serve as a short-term fill and trusted platform for pilots that want to report on UAP. It also has built-in analytics capability and is funded by Congress.
Gotcha. And also, Mr. Graves, are there any other industries that may be influenced by the NASA research on UAPs? And if so, how so?
Well, I think there is a large swath of commercial capabilities that could be brought to bear on this topic, from space-based or ground-based sensor systems that are available open source or through commercial marketplaces. And I think NASA's work, as they work to identify and highlight specific parameters that can be found, we can take that information and promulgate this through the public sector so that we can have a more open conversation about what we're seeing.
You know, in 2020, the Department of Defense released several videos of UAPs, including Mr. Freyer's experience, U.S. Navy pilots that recorded footage. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary report on UAP events. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson stated that NASA would begin to investigate these events. In fact, I sit on Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and when we were doing a hearing with the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, I asked, you know, why NASA needed to be fully funded, and there were many great reasons, but one of them was actually had to do with UAPs. He actually mentioned, you know, is there life out there? I don't know. And so either way, these actions ultimately led NASA to assemble the independent study team that I mentioned earlier. Also in 2021, Harvard University stood up the Galileo project to research and examine the origins of UAP. So it seems like both, you know, from NASA and in the higher education community, because of the work that y'all have done and people standing up, you know, I think we're seeing some of that stigma slowly going away. Mr. Freyer, do you believe that military pilots feeling empowered to share their UAP experiences has directly impacted the scientific community's research goals on this topic?
I would say yes. I would say that, you know, starting in 2017, when it actually came out, it took that stigma away. I mean, I've talked to multiple senators who said prior to that, if you'd have mentioned UAP, you'd have been laughed off the hill. And now we're sitting here today for a public testimony on what's actually going on. You know, I'm hoping that this curve will be more of an exponential and we'll get more and more transparent to the level that we can.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important. I couldn't imagine, you know, I'm not a pilot, but I used to fly gliders in Civil Air Patrol. Huh? Yeah,
Pilot?
I mean, you know. And so either way, I mean, I couldn't imagine, you know, being in the glider and seeing something and then not feeling like I had the agency to talk about it. Mr. Graves, can you discuss the importance of seeking scientists to sit on your advisory board?
Absolutely. I think ultimately this is going to be a scientific problem. And not only that, it's also an engineering problem. I've been working with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics to help them stand up a UAP integration committee to help integrate their engineering prowess into this problem. And so, yes, very much, I think this is an engineering and scientific problem as much as a national security problem.
And how might Congress help to facilitate partnerships between the scientific community and the UAP focus groups within government?
Well, I think one of the things they can do is to have these types of hearings to communicate to the public that this is a topic of interest. I think that there is a pseudo-market, if you will, of interested capabilities and talent that want to approach this topic. And we're seeing that start to grow now. So I think continued conversation, reduction of stigma is going to allow that to flourish and allow answers to help generate themselves.
100%. Well, thank you all for being here and thank you for your work. I think it's important that we keep our top scientific minds focused on this issue and look for ways to increase collaboration. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Eles estão falando aí que tem que ter uma análise científica da parada. Não é mais coisa de ufólogo maluco, sabe? Não, mano, é uma parada científica. Obviamente, é aquela questão fundamental que ele falou ali, né? Nós estamos sozinhos? Eu não sei. Mas, pô, tratar isso de uma forma científica é, no mínimo, plausivelmente, sei lá, óbvio e cientificamente falando, é necessário, sabe?
Sim.
Quer falar mais uma coisa? Não, né?
Acho que eu não vou comentar agora. Podemos continuar, na verdade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say I want to thank you for having this hearing, and I want to thank Mr. Burchett and Ms. Luna for leading this hearing. And with that, I yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct this, I believe, to Mr. Grush, but if any of you all feel like you need to jump in, just jump right in. We're good. Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. As soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans will pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the skiff if we were allowed to get in a skiff with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
Por tanto tempo, né,
I
ele
do know
fala.
the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right.
Olha isso, cara, não tem muita coisa que ele não pode falar.
When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because it's sensitive.
All right.
Que
If you don't
doideira.
want to jump in on any issue, you're more than welcome to.
Muito doido.
What level of security clearance is
Não, tipo assim, eu queria falar que, cara, audiência pública e o cara falando publicamente que tem coisas que não pode falar publicamente. Tipo.
Não, é muito sinistro. É, no mínimo, tipo, revolucionário, assim, é histórico mesmo.
É.
required to fully access these programs?
Well, anybody who has...
and I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin.
Gates?
So please go right ahead.
Certainly difference between member access and, say, somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the Access Adjudicative Authority should be able to grant you access.
Ms. Burchett, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right, but I draw a point on that because we can have access to those programs, and so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Burchett. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this or not, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient. So who gets to decide this, in your opinion, in the past?
It's a group of career senior executive officials.
Okay, are they government officials?
Both in and out.
Do what?
Both in and out of government, and that's about as far as I can go there. Yeah.
All right, well, that leads to my next question. Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs? To your knowledge? I mean, we know we audit the Pentagon every year, and I've been here 5 years, and they failed the dadgum thing every year. They lose over $1 billion a year, we think, and I was told the Department of Defense maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means. But in the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So tell me.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work the other way.
If you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay, now you get a call from the IRS. So. Please, what corporations?
Yeah, I don't know the specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide
they know.
To the committees.
BlackRock.
I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay, has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
Okay, I've been told to ask you what that is and how to get it in the record.
which...
What have you stated publicly in your interviews for the congressional record?
If you reference my News Nation interview and I talk about a multi-decade, campaign to disenfranchise public interest, basically. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
apologize, Mr. Chairman. I yield back negative 21 seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. I do concur with the ranking member as well as several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand.
Não, só comentando que, tipo assim, eles estão falando sobre essa questão das informações secretas ali, e daí ele fala como é que funciona essa hierarquia, quem é que tá nesse alto escalão, ele fala que é um grupo bem seleto de pessoas ali do alto escalão, e ele fala que são pessoas de fora e de dentro do governo, né, não são só pessoas do governo. Daí ele já vai lá e fala, né, quem são as empresas que estão envolvidas nisso, quem que tá financiando, tipo assim, tem $1 bilhão sumindo ali do caixa do Pentágono e os caras não explicam. Então, assim, olha o nível das perguntas públicas que os caras estão falando, tipo...
Ele até relutou ali em responder, tu vê ele, tipo, eita ferro, que pergunta é essa?
Não, ele não respondeu, tipo, 10% das perguntas que esse cara fez agora. Tipo, ele não podia responder nada, assim, era tudo altamente secreto, as perguntas.
Então as brabas foi dele, que ele não pôde nem responder, tá ligado? Tipo...
Ele mandou altas brabas ali.
Understand what you're putting on the table here and what you're putting on the line here, and we thank you for that. Mr. Grush, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answers to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field wide. I was wondering if you could speak.
Ele falou cubo vermelho, que era do tamanho de um campo de futebol, red cube.
Não foi bola vermelha ou foi cubo vermelho?
Sei lá, mas tipo, que doideira.
A little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Grush, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
So I'll just say that the information about the contractor himself were provided by a witness, and I have no particular detail in that relationship.
Mr. Grush?
The kind of general unclass wave tops, certainly the contractors, are the metal benders, so to speak. They're the ones actually doing specific performance on government contracts.
Are they required to issue any disclosure regarding UAP sightings, or do they engage in any reporting around this?
In terms of the contractors?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
They do not. Okay. Now, when it comes to notification that you had mentioned about IRAD programs, we have seen defense contractors abuse their contracts before through this committee. I have seen it personally, and I have also seen the notification requirements to Congress abused. I am wondering, one of the loopholes that we see in the law is that there is, at least from my vantage point, is that depending on what we're seeing, is that there are no actual definitions or requirements for notification. What methods of notification did you observe? Like when they say they notified Congress, how did they do that? Do you have
For certain IRAD activities, I can only think of ones conventional in nature. Sometimes they flow through certain, I'll just say, SAP programs that have cognizant authority over the Air Force or something, and those are congressionally reported compartments, but IRAD is literally internal to the contractor, so as long as it's money, either profits, private investment, et cetera, they can do whatever they want.
To put a finer point on it, when there is a requirement for any agency or company to notify, or any agency to notify Congress, do they contact the chairman of a committee? Do they get them on the phone specifically? Is this through an email to hypothetically a dead email box?
A lot of it comes through what they call the PPR, Periodic Program Review process. If it's a SAP or Controlled Access Program Equity, and then those go to the specific committees, whether it be the SAS, CASC, HISI.
Thank you. I apologize. I just, my time is limited. Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the ARROW program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed out approach of being able to look at origin and destination before the incident, as well as getting a better contextual understanding of how these objects are interacting with each other.
Engraçado que a grande reclamação da galera que filma, né, OVNIs, vamos filmar OVNIs, aí pega uma TechPix, tá ligado? Que o filme é muito ruim. Então, ele citou ali, cinematics, tem que estar incluído, né? Tem que estar incluso na questão dos relatórios desses fenômenos, dos WAPs. Porque, bota uma câmera, instala umas câmeras ali nos lugares que tem mais avistamento, com um zoom sinistro, sabe? 4K, já é um avanço. Por isso que é tão importante cinematics, ter um feedback audiovisual, né? Visual, no caso, né? Enfim.
Eu acho que essa cinemática fala até do nível do sensor que eles têm ali, né? Não é só uma câmera filmando, mas é uma tecnologia que mostra a cinemática ali, a análise do movimento da parada. E eles até falam sobre isso, que na hora que ela fala assim, não agora, faz tempo que eles fizeram essa pergunta, mas fala assim, mas você acha que esses reports tem que vir dos pilotos da aeronáutica, dos voos comerciais, também da população, quem quiser fazer esses reports da população também, e dele fala assim, eu acho que esses reports têm que ser baseados em sensor, não eu vi um OVNI, ou eu filmei com o meu celular, cara, então não é só relato aleatório, são todos relatos com base de sensores que eles estão falando, né?
Realmente, porque se for só a câmera, eu disse ali, qualquer um pode fazer um fakezão, né, com essas IA aí hoje em dia, enfim, tem que ter os sensores, o movimento, a posição. Tem aquele sensor LiDAR, né? Imagina uma câmera... Quer dizer, o iPhone já tem isso, tá ligado? A câmera com LiDAR, aquele sensor. Imagine uma câmera com um LiDAR super ultra. Tá vendo? O LiDAR detectou que ele passou ali fisicamente também, tá ligado? Sei lá, enfim, várias coisas.
E antes ali que ela tava perguntando pro Grunch, ali, o cara do meio da inteligência, cara, que ali tem uma parte ali que eu, particularmente, parece que é difícil de entender o que eles estão falando, porque parece que eles estão falando um negócio super oculto, uma parada super interna deles ali, de como é que funciona o que eles estão investigando ali, como que funciona o esquema. E daí ela tá perguntando, parece que eles estão falando sobre os investimentos, né, do RenanRed, que é esse Instituto de Pesquisa em Desenvolvimento. Então, como é que entra essa grana, como é que sai essa grana, que grana é essa, quem é que tá investindo, como é que eles conversam, quem é que tá intermediando isso. Então, é como se ela estivesse trazendo essas informações para pesquisar mais a fundo o que tá oculto ali, e fica meio confuso mesmo, mas quem trabalha ali, quem tá por dentro, deve achar muito mais foda essas perguntas, mais do que a gente acha, né? Entender na íntegra o que eles estão falando ali, né?
Parece que eles estão dando uma volta, enfim, grandona pra, sei lá, tentar inserir uma pergunta, uma resposta ali que tá difícil de falar publicamente, tá ligado? Essa é a impressão que tá passando.
E eu acho que assim... Não sei se eu falo isso no final ou não, mas acho que eu vou falar agora. O que parece até dessa comissão que eles estão fazendo é que talvez um dos principais objetivos que eles têm é de fundar e criar esse órgão que vai organizar esses reports. Né? Porque eles falaram que tem muito avistamento hoje em dia, mas a galera não faz os relatos. Então parece que é como se fosse essa reunião, como se fosse um passo inicial para poder criar esse sistema de reports, daí começar a vir mais à tona, muito report, muita informação, muito
Faz
dado,
sentido.
muito dado. E daí começa a ampliar o disclosure, né? Então, veja que muito das perguntas que eles estão falando é sobre os reports, sobre, vamos reportar, vamos falar sobre isso e tal. Então, talvez é uma coisa que eles estão movimentando por trás aí com essa reunião para criar esse órgão bem mais fundamentado governamentalmente, né?
Para levantamento de dados, né? É tipo uma investigação científica da parada mesmo, né? Tornando isso...
E tem uma galera nos comentários aí falando assim, acho que não vai dar em nada, não vai dar em nada. Eu acho que vai dar muita coisa, galera. Acho que é só o começo mesmo.
Já tá dando, pô.
Acho que já tem muita história pra rolar aí.
Sim, continuando. Ainda falta um tempinho aqui, falta 46 minutos. Bora dali.
Thank you. Now, because I only have a minute left, I apologize, we only have 5 minutes today, but for the record, if you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions.
Bug foi esse?
If you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
And I would say, and I've told people that you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of the classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly what Mr. Grush can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Grosh to do that homework.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back to the chair.
Mr. Biggs?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for being here today. I'm over here. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get into specifics here, and a reason I'm going to go this way is because you've talked a bit about what I would call misdirection by official U.S. government with regard to UAPs, right? And so I'm going to get to that in a second. But last week, White House NSC spokesman John Kirby stated that UAPs are having an impact on our training ranges and need to be treated as a legitimate issue. Do you concur with his statements? That's for each of you.
Yes.
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 Okay. Now, having said that, I'm going to take you to specific instances around the Phoenix Valley, because that's where I live. And in '97, we had the famous Phoenix Light case.
Phoenix
I don't know if any of
Lights.
you are familiar with that. There were two things that went along with that, and the explanation was military training range off Luke and the Barry Goldwater Range. Do you know anything different other than the official explanation of those lights?
Only what's in the public vernacular about it. That was outside the scope of my duties.
And if we wanted to, just my question along with my colleague from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if we wanted to find out more about that, where would we go to find the files, and who would we address? And are you going to tell me we need to go to a SCIF so you can tell us in a SCIF?
I could potentially give you a vector on that. That specific case, I'm familiar with it in terms of public, but I give you a vector in a closed environment, yeah.
That would be good, thank you. So if it's true that UAPs are having an impact on training ranges, and this administration considers it to be a legitimate issue, what steps can Congress take to address training range impacts? And I say that having two very large training ranges in my state. And so we'll start with Mr. Graves and going down the panel.
Some of the Navy that have a range failure report that gathers information from pilots. I understand that a service-wide reporting mechanism is still pending. However, that would be a great next step, not only for gathering information, but for showing the troops that it is an acceptable topic and reducing the stigma.
Okay, please, all of you continue.
Yeah, as a recipient of a lot of those training range reports, sometimes we only get contextual kind of oral reporting. It'd be nice if they attached all sensor data and there's a system in place that can handle multiple classifications of data. And that's an issue with the F-35, right? That jet was never built to be an ISR platform. And it's a pain in the, we'll just say, butt to get that data off. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with the previous two being a user of those training ranges. That the data has to be out there. You have to acknowledge that you're seeing them, and then you have to collect the data. Right now, you get the report. Someone says, I saw something, but no one collects the radar data to back it up and do research.
Okay. Do you believe that the 2019 classification guidelines for UAPs interferes with the federal government's ability to be transparent with the American people? And do you think we need to be more transparent with the American people? All of you, yeah.
I'll say yes to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm familiar with at least the UAP Task Force 2019 Security Classification Guide. I think it's fair. I did actually help author that with the director.
you got a bias that
Yeah,
way then.
but I will say, I'll call it a lazy attitude about declassifying videos. I mean, I've seen some of the videos of the recent shoot down, and I saw no reason that couldn't have been released as long as they mask some data. The American people deserve to see that imagery and full motion video.
I would think, well, in my opinion, I will say things are overclassified. I know for a fact the video or the pictures that came out in the 2020 report that had the stuff off the East Coast, they were taken with an iPhone. off the East Coast. A buddy of mine was one of the senior people there, and he said they were originally classified to TSSCI. And my question to him was, what's TSSCI about these? They're an iPhone literally off the vacapes. That's not TSSCI. So they're overclassified, and as soon as they do that, they go in a vault, and then you all have to look for them.
Yeah, so with the overclassification, that may be one way. Are there other ways that the DoD or intelligence agencies are keeping this information from the American people or even from Congress?
I think part of that has been not encouraging reporting. If the problem is not something that can be measured, it's not something that's going to be fixed.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm out of time, and
All
I
right.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Deixa eu fazer
First of all,
comentário,
without
tá?
objection, Representative Nick Langworthy of New York is
Tem um termo que eles estão falando toda hora ali que é skiff, né? Para quem não sabe o que é skiff, é uma área, um compartimento de um lugar de compartilhamento seguro de informação, tá? Então é como se fosse uma sala, ou pode ser um data center também, pode ser uma coisa online, mas é um lugar que você pode compartilhar informações e não vai ter nenhum espião, nenhum celular ouvindo, ninguém que não possa ouvir ouvindo. Então é um lugar seguro para você compartilhar informações. Então tudo que eles estão falando, que o David Grush fala, não, depois a gente pode ir lá e eu posso falar para vocês.
Ah, isso seria o skiff.
Isso é o skiff, quando ele vai lá no cantinho contar para ele.
É o local seguro para passar a braba.
Exato. Só que eles comentaram no começo da reunião que parece que esse skiff foi negado pro pessoal do comitê, entendeu? Então, assim, até todas essas informações que o David Grant fala assim, eu posso contar para vocês em ambiente privado, parece que ele não vai conseguir contar agora, porque foi negado o skiff. Então, assim...
Entendi.
Isso que ficou para mim, eu não tenho certeza, tá, gente? Mas, assim, parece que todas essas perguntas que o David tá falando que vai responder depois, talvez demore um pouco até liberarem esse skiff para ele poder contar, entendeu? Não sei se ele vai poder sair da reunião e contar para eles ali no corredor, entendeu? Então, sei lá, os caras até suprimindo o skiff, entendeu? Muito doido isso.
waived down the subcommittee for purpose of questioning witnesses at today's subcommittee hearing. And then we go to Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys coming out today, testifying. Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town, and so I think that's because I'm from Missouri. You've got to show me, right? With that being said,
Missouri.
There's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grush, and so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So. At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity. And
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment.
Olha
It's
aí.
the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Cê é louco.
Okay.
Então ele tá falando que tem gente se machucando tanto com o governo como com os OVNIs também, com os UAPs, né? Tipo assim, enfim.
Mano, very disturbing. que maluquice, né, velho?
É muito louco. É inacreditável que isso é público.
We sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
Eita porra, braba.
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not.
Meu Deus, mano.
Okay. And so, with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system.
A gente não tá bilhões, tá? Ele falou errado aí, tá? A gente tem anos-luz, é mais perto, não é bilhões de anos-luz, é uma informação
Milhões,
errada.
milhares, né? Que já é absurda a distância, né? Agora bilhões é tipo, sei lá, no início do universo ali. Então essa é a pergunta mais clássica, né, dos cientistas. Como é que, tipo assim, se tem outras civilizações em outros planetas, como que eles venceram a tecnologia para vencer esse percorrimento, né, esse percurso do espaço-tempo de anos-luz, tá ligado? Tipo, pra quem não sabe anos-luz, é porque tem gente que não sabe, né? Tipo, anos-luz a velocidade da luz é 300 mil quilômetros por segundo. Agora imagine 300 mil em anos. Tipo assim, converta o segundo em anos. Quantos anos quantos segundos tem um ano, tá ligado? Multiplica isso por 300 mil quilômetros. Mano, é muito longe, pô. É muito longe, pô. Muito distante. Enfim. Continuando.
Ela na verdade, 300 mil quilômetros por segundo, na verdade.
298 ponto, sei lá. Arredondando a 300 mil. Enfim.
Os nossos filmes de ficção científica já falam sobre dobra do espaço-tempo.
A constante da velocidade da luz, né? Constante da física e que, enfim. Let's go. Inclusive, eu lembro que eles falaram de uma parada avançada de física, de holográfica e não sei o que. Vamos continuar assistindo aí.
And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional.
Aí ele fala. Enfim, a pergunta dele foi boa. Vamos ser sinceros. Tipo assim, os caras viajam bilhões de quilômetros e chega aqui e cai, tá ligado? Tipo.
Derruba a nave.
Derruba a nave. Caí aqui. Difícil de pilotar aqui no planeta.
Se você for ver, todo mundo que tá fazendo as perguntas, parece que a galera meio que acredita, né? A galera tá tipo, mano, vamos revelar esse negócio. E esse é o cara que, pelo menos pra mim, é o único que parece cético da situação, né? Que ele tá falando, eu não acredito, tanto é que eu sou do Missouri, eu preciso me mostrar, eu sou meio São Tomé, eu quero ver o negócio pra acreditar.
Sim.
E ele fala, como que os caras atravessam o universo e cai aqui? Bate a nave?
Pois é, tipo, não, é um ótimo argumento, tá ligado? Tipo, até eu fico, mano, é real, né? Tipo, porra, what the fuck, né?
Eu tenho uma opinião pra isso, mas vamos mais pra frente.
Lá no finalzinho a gente marca um textinho aí, porque é uma pergunta muito boa. Bora.
Sim.
Potential, could you expound on that?
To answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash. N number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity.
Olha aí. Falo disso direto aqui no canal, pô. Tipo, sobre o princípio holográfico e tal. Agora eu sou o doido. Tô zoando.
Chupa essa.
If you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about.
Né? E tem os caras que, por exemplo, Nassim Haramein explica muito bem essa questão da princípio holográfico. Inclusive tem um próprio artigo dele sobre gravidade quântica, né, que eles falam, que é princípio holográfico lá. Então, enfim, não vou falar de física avançada aqui.
O Yuri falou que teu mic tá meio alto, você pode diminuir um pouquinho.
Tá dando uma estouradinha aí, né? Diminuir.
Mas ele tá falando aí sobre o princípio holográfico, sobre seres interdimensionais de outras dimensões. Então, por esse princípio geométrico, ele consegue influenciar na nossa dimensão, né? Como se a nossa sombra tá ali na segunda dimensão, então eles conseguem... ele vai falar isso, na verdade, que eles conseguem fazer isso à distância, né? Então...
Eles fazem isso à distância e tropeçam ali num morro e cai. Eu tô zoando. Bora.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring.
Only a theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military and contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of. So,
would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, and but the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to them it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described. So
you're not aware? It has not happened that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Eu me rendo, aí o back, eu estou me retirando, né?
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down, he said that his FLIR system malfunctioned, and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Oh, Lord.
I think this goes to that national security side. You can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it. And the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people, and that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Grush in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest
Que é aquilo que você tinha falado lá, né? Que é o...
que é a salinha secreta que foi negada pra eles, né? Ele tá falando que eles precisam dela, mas... sei lá quem negou.
Não, ele falou ainda assim, tipo, pra não colocar o Sr. Crush em perigo. Tipo, mano, caralho, que doideira.
Claro. Não, e sabe uma coisa que eu tava pensando? O mais doido é o seguinte, a gente tá vendo uma reunião do Congresso Americano falando sobre isso, sobre UAPs, sobre todos esses fenômenos paranormais e anômalos, né, na verdade. E o mais doido é que eles não estão focando nos fenômenos. A gente não tá focando no que o cara viu exatamente, ou tem ET ou não. A gente tá focando no... O governo tá escondendo isso da gente.
Sim, sim.
O medo que vocês têm de falar sobre isso, como isso tá sendo suprimido, é super secreto. Tipo assim, então, essa reunião não tá falando sobre ET, tá falando sobre seres humanos escondendo isso, saca? Tipo, cara, isso é muito doido, mano. Isso é muito doido.
Dayon Supremo.
É tipo, mano, isso tá secreto, é secreto. Tipo, não é... Tipo, você já viu um ET? Como é que foi? Não é esse o papo, sabe? Tipo, é muito maluco.
Sinistro, né?
Bora.
That the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the Fine Oversight Committee. I yield back.
Toda hora eu me rendo, mas eu me retiro, né? A tradução não tá 100% ali, a legenda, mas dá pra entender.
Earlier this year, a Chinese spy balloon was shot down off the coast of my home state of South Carolina. Since the Roswell incident in 1947...
Roosevelt, de novo aí, ó. Eu sempre toco, velho, porque tipo, o Roosevelt é o pivô da parada, mano. É o início desse rolê inteiro aí.
Many Americans have wondered about the dangers of unknown objects crisscrossing our skies. Whether these are UAPs or weather phenomena, advanced technology from American allied or enemy forces, or something more out of this world. So my first question, I have several questions, and if we can just be quick on these first two, I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and then I'll get to each of you individually. The first one, when you reported your experiences with a UAP, did any of you face any repercussions with your superiors, yes or no?
No.
No. I've actually never seen anything personally, believe it or not. So.
All right. And then do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs, yes or no?
Ó, pergunta braba.
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated publicly, yes.
Olha isso, tipo, sim.
Ele falou sim.
Yes, but currently I don't speak for the United States government.
Okay, thank you.
Cara, muito foda. Absurdo.
Não, o cara falou que
os caras estão escondendo e é sobre juramento.
Tipo, mano, a conspiração máxima, tipo assim, porra.
Conspiração máxima, mano.
Mano, como, pô, mano, é doido, é. The truth is real mesmo. Hã?
Só tá foguete depois dessa reunião, isso. Foguete sem som aí pra não assustar os pets, galera.
Mas, tipo, eu tô, tipo, feliz, porque, tipo, mano, isso é uma parada revolucionária, mano. É tipo, vai mudar. Mano, tô doido? Não. Mano, é real, tá ligado? A parada aconteceu. Tá acontecendo, né? Bora.
I have a few questions for Mr. Graves. What percentage of UAP sightings, in your belief, go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting, perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs.
That's just my personal estimate.
In the incident at Virginia Beach, do you believe the Navy took the danger to your aircraft seriously after it was reported?
Absolutely.
A few questions for Mr. Favor. As an
Não, com certeza os caras vão olhar aquilo e vão falar, mano, isso é perigoso, pô. Olha a tecnologia que esses caras têm. Tipo, mano, é lógico que é perigoso pra eles, né, pra gente. Assim. Tipo assim, o primeiro estado de alerta, sei lá, da percepção humana de deparar com o desconhecido é o quê? É medo, né? Medo do desconhecido. Então é perigoso. Enfim.
95% dos avistamentos, na experiência do cara, não são reportados, né? Tipo, 95% a galera só guarda no coração.
Tipo, nossa, mudou minha vida, mas vou divulgar isso.
Não posso falar.
Vou perder o emprego.
Expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
Tá, porra, tá vendo? Tipo, mano, o cara é formado em física. Ah, não era ele, não. Quer dizer, ele pelo menos não pronunciou isso, né? Mas, enfim. Vamos continuar.
Reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapons systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test ranges for that.
It took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be declassified. Do you feel there was a good reason to prevent lawmakers from having access to this footage?
No, I just think it was ignored when it happened, and it just sat somewhere in a file. Never got reported.
In a drawer. It happens a lot up here.
Todas as perguntas dessa mulher é sinistra.
Sim,
a couple
tô
of
vendo.
questions for you too, sir, this morning. What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government? Of the 5% that are reported.
I can only speak for my personal leadership over at NGA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I could triage. So,
do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Mano, aí, ó.
You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Cara, é absurdo, mano. É absurdo.
Mano, olha que a pergunta mais braba de todas, pô, essa aí foi. Tipo,
O governo fala com ET, não posso falar publicamente.
mano, é tipo, se o cara negou isso, não, mano, ele, tipo assim, ele tá falando que tem, pô, tipo assim, eu não posso falar publicamente. Se ele falasse, não tem, igual ele falou, né, tem várias perguntas que ele respondeu. Não tenho conhecimento sobre isso, especificamente, sabe? Ele poderia falar isso, não tenho conhecimento ou dados sobre isso. Ele só falou, não posso falar sobre isso, tipo... O cara que passou a informação pra ele falou, mano, não fala quem te passou, mas pelo... Mano, é doido, que doideira. Vamos continuar.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Olá.
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha.
Skiff.
Okay, so, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into...
Não, agora a gente chegou no ápice da reunião, que essa foi a maior notícia, a maior manchete dessa audiência, que foi o cara alegar que foi encontrado material biológico em uma das naves, e era material biológico não humano. Tipo assim, cientistas e especialistas que, assim, avaliaram lá, falaram, não, isso aqui não é humano. Então, Olha o nível dessa informação, tá ligado? Tipo, acharam um pedaço de corpo de ET ali na nave. E tá lá. Então, pesquisando no laboratório. Beleza. E o cara falou isso sobre juramento. Tipo,
Loucura.
normal.
Ele teve vários que ele, só no esquife ali, né?
É.
Mas esse ele, não, mano, tipo...
Não, é muito absurdo. É muito absurdo.
The truth is real.
Eu tô muito empolgado, galera. Tô muito empolgado porque é uma parada surreal pra mim. Eu tô feliz, assim, que isso tá acontecendo.
Eu nem sei descrever, tipo assim, é porque... Cara, que doideira, mano. Não sei se é felicidade que eu tô sentindo, mas é tipo uma... Caraca, eu não sou doido, tá ligado?
Uma empolgação, misto com loucura, misto com caralho, tipo, é doido.
To a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting?
Tipo, só falando assim, tipo assim, não é questão de, eu sou doido porque eu acredito em ET. É porque, na verdade, é uma questão óbvia, científica até, que a galera, tipo assim, os cientistas não levavam a sério. Agora tá sendo levado a sério. Essa é a minha empolgação, tá ligado? Porque é uma coisa óbvia a se pesquisar, né? A trazer à tona uma sala de debate, uma pesquisa séria científica, sabe? Enfim.
And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super. Thank you. And I yield back.
Caralho, essa mulher é sinistra.
Ela deinou o Supremo.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being here today to discuss this very unique topic. And I'd like to jump right into my questions, if you don't mind. Commander Fravor, can you briefly describe your background?
Yeah, I was an enlisted Marine, Naval Academy graduate, Navy, flew for 18 years, got a master's from University of Houston, and I've worked in the private sector for the last, 16 years, 17 years. I do a lot of defense work. So
Really gold-plated credentials. Commander Fravor, we have all seen the floating Tic Tac video that you engaged with on November 14th, 2004. Can you briefly talk about why you were off the coast of San Diego that day?
yeah, we were at a workup with all the battle groups. So we integrate the ships with the carrier, the air wing with the carrier, and we start working. So we were doing an air-to-air defense to hone not only our skills, but those of the USS Princeton when they had been tracking them for 2 weeks. The problem was that there was never manned aircraft airborne when they were tracking them, and this was the first day, and unfortunately, we were the ones airborne and went and saw it.
Do you remember the weather that day? Was it cloudy or windy or anything out of the ordinary on the Pacific coast?
It was actually, if you're familiar with San Diego, it was a perfect day. Light winds, no white caps, clear skies, not a cloud. It was, for flying, it was the best.
Now, is it true that you saw, in your words, a 40-foot flying tic-tac-shaped object?
That's correct. Or for some people that can't know what a tic-tac is, it's a giant flying propane tank.
Caraca, é muito grande, né?
Come up on radar or interfere with your radar or the USS Princeton?
The Princeton tracked it, the Nimitz tracked it, the E-2 tracked it. We never saw it on our radars. Our fire control radars never picked it up. The other airplane that took the video did get it on a radar. As soon as it tried to lock it, it jammed the radar, spit the lock, and he rapidly switched over to the targeting pod, which you can do in the F-18.
From what you saw that day and what you've seen on video, did you see any source of propulsion from the flying object, including on any potential thermal scans from your aircraft?
No, there's none. There's no IR plume coming out. And Chad, who took the video, went through all the EO, which is black and white TV, and the IR modes, and there's no visible signs of propulsion. It's just sitting in space at 20,000 feet.
In your career, have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
The truth.
Abruptly,
Energia infinita.
very determinate.
0.0.
It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on
Caraca.
Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Caralho,
Now,
velho.
was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no, just on the performance, it would just left.
Cara, como é que vai acertar, né?
Ela só ia sair dali em um segundo, eles falaram.
That we have a problem here that needs further investigation.
Yes.
In your belief, is this flying Tic Tac? I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the earth?
No, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists who have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have.
Olha só, velho.
Cara, é muito
Either
famoso.
the United States has an adversary here in this world that we don't know, or we really have some serious investigations to do. I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else about the November 14th, 2004 incident that you think is important for this committee to know that you haven't been asked here today?
No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that were tracking it, and then for us to get visual and to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever. I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
It's not a joke, man.
For all of you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Esse cara mandou muito bem também.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here and the courage it took to come forward and again, the sacrifice that each of you have made. I serve on the National Security Subcommittee for the Financial Services Committee, so I really want to stay in the national security lane, if I may. So when we think about traditional adversaries and both us towards them and them towards us, we probe their capabilities. We look for weaknesses, and we collect that data, that reconnaissance for in the event we need it in the future. For each of you, yes or no question, based off of your own experience or the data that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Grush?
Ó, teoria lá, teoria da... Estão nos observando, tá ligado? Coletando dados.
É.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Again, in the national security vein, is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Brush?
Yes.
Fravor?
Definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes. Possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially. I would say definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves...
É aquilo, né? Ciência, tecnologia é neutra. Você pode usar ela tanto para o bem quanto para o mal. Então, tipo, se eles viram uma nave com uma tecnologia ultramente avançada em comparação às nossas, obviamente a gente, mano, esse cara vai me destruir, pô. Facinho. Então, potencialmente, é isso que eles...
Mas tem a questão legal também, que eu falei, que esse cara trabalha no serviço de segurança, né? Então ele tá falando assim, você acha que isso é uma ameaça à nossa segurança? Potencialmente.
Tá. Sim, também, isso
então,
também.
Isso dá um aparato jurídico pra ele agir lá no trabalho dele, falar, não, vamos investigar, isso aqui é uma ameaça, sabe? Não necessariamente os ETs querem fazer mal pra gente, mas, pô, ter um negócio voando com alta tecnologia, a gente tem que fazer alguma coisa, né?
Sim. Tipo, a gente tá explicando o contexto do que ele respondeu, né? Não o que a gente acredita, né? Enfim.
Falar que eu acredito.
Would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Não ia conseguir defender minha nave.
Based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology capabilities?
Negócio de Roosevelt lá. Viu?
external observation.
Meu Deus, velho, olha isso, pô. Tipo,
Com certeza interessado na nossa.
é o que eu disse no início da live, tá ligado? Eu nem vi eles falando isso. React ao vivo aqui, sincero. Tipo, mano, they know Supremo.
Sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah. Yes.
Is there any indication that the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't have an answer.
I can't confirm or deny that in a public setting.
And
No.
could you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Fravor.
No, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm the last member to go, but there clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action. I would encourage the chairman to demand that we have any and all, but in particular Mr. Grush, talk to us in a skiff. And if that access is denied, I will personally volunteer to initiate the Holman Rule against any personnel or any program or any agency that denies access to Congress. Mr. Chairman, with that, I will yield the remainder of my time to my fellow colleague from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ogles, for the great questions, brother. Mr. Grush, I might have asked this before, but I want to make sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Olha isso.
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you can imagine assessing an unknown unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
How do you think we ought to handle UAP whistleblower complaints like yours in the future?
Yeah, there was some issue with mine. So, PPD-19 process, it goes to the Intel committees, either through PPD-19 or ICD-120. There's not a good way for the Intelligence Community Inspector General to provide that to other committees. And I asked my information to be sent to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee because there are Title X equities at play, but there was no smooth process to do so. Yeah.
That's a trash can.
Caramba.
Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively punished for so. Yeah.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Pausa aí rapidinho. Aí ele fez outra pergunta super importante, que eles estavam falando sobre pesquisa de engenharia reversa com os OVNIs que o governo tem. Ele falou, alguém já se machucou com isso? O cara, sim, né? Inclusive, o Bob Lazar, quando ele vem lá e ele entra numa base militar, que, pra quem não sabe, né, a gente comentou, mas Bob Lazar foi um cara que trabalhou numa dessas pesquisas aí de engenharia reversa, que ele trabalhava, inclusive, no sistema de propulsão, que ele detalha lá, fala que era um sistema gravitacional.
Sim, eu lembro, o documentário dele, eu lembro.
Ele fala que é um negócio assim que você empurra a mão e o negócio empurra a tua mão de volta. É como se fosse um ímã, os dois ímãs se repelem, só que ele faz isso com qualquer coisa, é uma força gravitacional, então ele detalha. E o Bob Lazar fala que quando ele entrou lá, era em dupla, né? Era ele e o outro cientista. E parece que o outro cientista, que era parceiro dele, tinha morrido antes, entendeu? Então, assim, tem cientista fazendo pesquisa e fazendo merda lá com a tecnologia, eles morrem, entendeu? Tipo...
Sim, né? Tipo, pô, o cara tá mexendo uma parada tipo, que eles nem sabem de onde... Mano, maluquice, velho.
E daí ele até fala sobre material radioativo, entendeu? Ele fala assim, e foi com material radioativo? Dele, não posso contar. E o Bob Lazar também fala que essa propulsão gravitacional deles era feita com um elemento que nem estava na tabela periódica na época, era um elemento, acho que 147 lá.
Eu lembro disso.
É uma molécula que consegue ter mais propriedades gravitacionais que o normal, entendeu? Daí talvez isso aí seja radioativo, o cientista vai lá abrir, vai mexer e morre, entendeu? Então, os caras só estão falando sobre isso no Congresso, assim, tipo, tranquilo, assim, normal.
Doideira, né, velho?
Beleza. Tá chegando.
Something a little bit out of the ordinary here. we're going to give 3 people a chance at an additional 3 minutes. So, Mr. Burchett, do you want to keep going?
Why don't you come back to me, Mr. Chairman? Miss Luna, if she's on, is she on that list?
Sure.
Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by News Nation, and it follows Mr. Grush's full interview for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Grush, why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either a biological or astrophysics perspective, I just like to keep an open mind on what it could be. Yeah.
Okay, and referring to your News Nation interview.
Aí eles estão talvez dando uma deixa, porque eles estão falando sobre assim, por que você não tá filmando que é tecnologia extraterrestre? Ele fala, vamos deixar aberto e tal.
Ele não afirmou, porque às vezes tipo uma coisa muito complexa, igual ele disse ali, né? Mas continua.
Mas abre margem pra gente começar a pensar sobre os intraterrenos, que são civilizações avançadas que moram nesse mesmo planeta, que em dimensões separadas, né? Em outros planos do próprio planeta. E ele fala sobre o princípio holográfico de outras dimensões. Ele fala assim, vamos deixar aberto pra gente pensar em outras possibilidades. Tipo assim, talvez o que ele quer dizer é que, cara, talvez isso nem seja extraterrestre. São tecnologias aqui da Terra, que em outras dimensões, de outras civilizações.
Pois é, tem... Às vezes nem em outra dimensão. Às vezes, tipo assim, uma civilização que a galera não teve contato. Que tá aqui milênios ali, conseguiram, sei lá... Que tem essa questão do Agartha, né? Que até o...
Agartha,
que até o... Como é que é o nome do brabão lá da CIA que foi preso? Que não pode voltar nos Estados Unidos? O hackerzão lá, o...
Snowden.
O Snowden, Edward Snowden, ele falou uma parada sobre a Agartha, do Botafé, mano?
Você tinha comentado, né?
Sinistro. Enfim, continuando aqui.
Pra quem não sabe, só a Agartha seria essa dimensão interna da Terra, tá? Como se o próprio planeta existem outras dimensões paralelas, então existem outras realidades no próprio planeta, e é como se fosse um outro país ali, outra região do planeta.
Mas às vezes nem em outra dimensão, isso que eu quero dizer. Às vezes é nessa aqui, entendeu? Tipo, eles entram ali pelas manchas solares, que o Nassim fala, né? Que são os vulcões. Inclusive, os vulcões têm grande atividade ufológica, né? Tem essa questão. Enfim.
É que depende de como a pessoa interpreta a dimensão, entendeu? A dimensão é... Tipo, eu tô aqui na terceira dimensão e minha sombra tá na segunda dimensão. Mas elas estão no mesmo lugar, elas estão interagindo, sabe? Tipo, não é como se fosse um outro lugar bizarro. Tipo assim, é o mesmo lugar, só que é só um princípio geométrico, né? Um princípio de movimento, que a coisa tá configurada, mas...
Sim, tem todo esse rolê aí também. First handshake, lembra do Interestelar? Que ele aperta... Sim. Tipo, ele tá no hipercubo ali, quadridimensional, e ele aperta a mão do cara lá na quarta dimensão, na quinta, sei lá. Enfim, continuando, porque é um assunto que vai, tipo... Porque tem aqueles, né, que falam, não, ETs não são aqui da Terra, são seres extradimensionais. Aí tem todo esse rolê, não, ETs são demônios. Mano, é tanta coisa que tem que desdenhar aqui. Mas enfim.
You had referenced specific treaties between governments. Article 3 of the Nuclear Arms Treaty with Russia identifies UAPs. It specifically mentions them. To your knowledge, are there safety measures in place with foreign governments or other superpowers to avoid an escalatory situation in the event that a UAP malevolent event occurs?
You're referring to actual public treaty in the UN Register. It's funny you mentioned that. The Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Outbreak of Nuclear War signed in 1971. Unclassified treaty publicly available. And if you cite the George Washington University National Security Archives, you will find the declassified in 2013 specific provisions in the specific red line flash message traffic with the specific codes pursuant to Article 3 and Article, also Situation 2, which is in the previously classified NSA archive. What I would recommend, and I tried to get access, but I got a wall of silence at the White House, was the specific incidents when those message traffic was used. I think some scholarship on that would open the door to a further investigation using those publicly available information.
Thank you. And then my last question with 51 seconds remaining. You mentioned white-collar crimes potentially being taking place in regards to a cover-up. Can you please elaborate?
I have concerns based on the interviews I conducted under my official duties of potential violations of the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR.
Thank you very much. Chairman, I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Raskin for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I thank the witnesses for their endurance and service today. Mr. Fravor, you've described your episode in detail now, and you call it the most credible UFO sighting in history. But I wonder, was this the first time that you encountered a UFO or a UAP in 2004?
Yes.
And what was your general attitude or perspective on the UFO discussion before that happened?
I never felt that we were alone with all the planets out there, but I wasn't a UFO person. I wasn't watching History Channel and MUFON and all that.
And have you had experiences or encounters since that happened?
No.
And so have you formed any general conclusions about what you think you experienced then?
Yes, I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
Ô, louco. Tá vendo aquela questão lá do avanço?
You've been able to answer in great detail on certain questions, and then other things you say you're not able to respond to. Can you just explain where you're drawing the line and what's the basis for that?
Yeah, based on my DOPSR security review and what they've determined that is unclassified.
I see. So you're answering any questions that just call upon your knowledge of unclassified questions, but anything that relates to classified matters you're not commenting on in this context.
In an open session, but happy to participate in a closed session at the right level, yeah.
Caraca.
And Mr. Graves, you've said that there are dozens of fellow pilots, military pilots. Are there also commercial pilots who've encountered the same kind of sightings that you described before?
They are similar. Commercial pilots have less range and less sensors to be able to reach out and look for objects over wide swaths of airspace. And so pilots are seeing them, commercial pilots are seeing them, and they're typically closer, and the range of what they're seeing is pretty large.
What is the most vivid, concrete sighting with the naked eye of the objects that you described before, the cube-like objects?
Certainly. I think the most vivid sighting of that would have been near midair that we had at the entrance to our working area. One of these objects was completely stationary at the exact entrance to our working areas, not only geographically, but also at altitude. So it was right where all the jets are going, essentially on the eastern seaboard. The two aircraft flew within about 50 feet of the object, and that was a very close visual sighting.
And you were in one of the aircraft?
I was not. I was there when the pilot landed. He canceled the mission after, and I was there. He was in the ready room with all his gear on, with his mouth open, and I asked him what the problem was, and he said he almost hit one of those darn things.
He said he was 50 feet away from it?
Yes, sir.
And his description of the object was consistent with the description you gave us before?
A dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere.
Inside of a clear sphere?
Yes.
And with no self-evident propulsion system?
No wings, no IR energy coming off of the vehicle, nothing tethering it to the ground. And that was primarily what we were experiencing out there.
Que doideira, velho.
Thank you very much for your service, and I yield back to Mr.
Estou sem tempo.
Very good. Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for all.
Esse cubo aí flutuante com uma esfera, mano, que brisa, mano. Isso aí é novo, sério mesmo. Isso, this is new.
Three of y'all, starting with Mr. Graves, why did you come forward on this issue?
I came forward because I felt that my colleagues did not have a way to mitigate this safety threat, and I wanted to help them. I was trained as an aviation safety officer by the Navy, and this seemed, it just felt right. I felt like I had to help the folks that were still flying and dealing with this.
Mr. Grush.
purely a sense of duty. I first swore an oath when I was a cadet 18 years ago, and I still uphold that even out of the uniform.
Commander?
I was pestered by a friend, and I asked why, and he said, "You're the one person that they can't discredit, and you'll add credibility to the New York Times article." So after about 6 times, I said,
Esse cara é gente boa, parece. O Fravo.
Yeah. This town isn't made, unfortunately, by people like you. We thank you. And I do want to also thank the people in the audience and the people that are watching this
Acabando já,
all
galera.
over the world that have kept this issue alive. You've endured criticism and derogatory remarks, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. And so God bless y'all. Thank y'all so much. We really appreciate you guys and gals.
Foda.
That's why we need term limits. Y'all keep clapping, us politicians just keep talking. So let me ask y'all, how can the public contribute to UAP reporting, and what avenues you think are available to the public to report these sightings?
Well, right now, I don't think there is a lot of public options for every man to be able to report on this. I think even for professionals that have sensor data that are seeing these on a regular basis, they're still hesitant to come forward. And so for the general public, I think encouraging the conversations that we're having today, looking for technology solutions that can be distributed so that objective data can be gathered is the first place to go.
Mr. Grush?
I'll just touch on the whistleblower side of it. I do encourage, current and former military, intelligence community, and industry contractors to come forward in a legal way, either through the IC or DoD or whatever the cognizant IGs are, to lead, join me in this discussion.
Commander, and I guess I should say this for the record. My daddy was United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division, so.
Hoorah.
Yes, sir. He was old school, him and Chesty Puller on Peleliu, so thank you,
wow.
brother.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Old school.
I'm not anything like my daddy. He was incredible. I'm very mediocre, to say the least, but go ahead.
You seem to be doing fine.
Yeah.
For me,
Caraca, que foda isso aí.
I was an
Eu não vi.
investigator, so the biggest thing that you learn, and I think that witnesses need to do is
Tipo, dá pra ver que os caras estão sendo verdadeiros mesmo, né? Autênticos.
stick to the
bem
facts,
humanos, né?
write it down, and don't speculate what you think it is because it will sway your decision. Just write the facts down. We can get all the facts together, and we can start to investigate and get a real honest story instead of it was this big.
Thank you all, and I want to thank everybody. We made history today.
Olha lá.
Mr. Chairman, how you-
Temos histórias, nossa, muito,
The truth is real.
muito foda.
Thank you. I know now we're going to be making some closing remarks, and so I just wanted to say a few
Considerações
things.
finais.
To our witnesses, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I know that it takes a lot of courage. You're telling really important information to this committee, and I just want to thank you also for all 3 of you, your service to our country. I also want to just note that today's hearing was both important but also serious, and I want to thank our subcommittee chairman, Mr. Grothman, I think for running a very fair and substantive hearing. I do want to thank the committee staff on both sides for the amount of work that it took to put this hearing in place, and certainly to all the members that have been involved in this issue prior to the hearing. I also want to note for our witnesses and for the public that I'm a freshman member of Congress, and I've only been here for 7 months, but this is by far the most bipartisan conversation and discussion that I have seen happen in the Congress. And I think that a topic of this significance as it relates to our national security, as it relates to information that we're trying to gather for the American public, does bring people together, and I think that's been really great to see. I think it's also important to note for the public, today in our hearing, we had on our side also both our full ranking member, which is Mr. Raskin, and our vice ranking member, which is Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, both here at our hearing. I think it shows the importance and seriousness that our side of the aisle is taking this important hearing, but also the broader issue as it relates to working with our Republican counterparts on this committee. I want to additionally add that I think it's really important that we have and continue these discussions and these hearings. Clearly, there's a lot of information that we don't know, but it's also very clear that we have to continue our investigation and accountability on asking the right questions and ensuring that they're part of the public record. One thing that was important today is some folks might wonder, why are we asking questions that might already be out there or that have been asked before? It's important that they're asked and put into the public record as it relates to this committee.
Aquilo que
So
você
I want
tinha
to
dito.
thank you for answering some questions multiple times, I know, not just in maybe meetings you had with some members, but also here in the public. Let me also just add an additional note that it's important also that our friends in the media and those that are not just reporting on this hearing, but that have reported on this topic and that may in the future, the media has an important role in this process. And it's very important that the media engages, does independent investigation, and reports on not just what happened today, but what they see independently as what is happening around UAPs in the broader community. That is also an important public benefit that we have in trying to get the information and the facts as it relates to this. Let me also just say finally that as a teacher and an educator and a longtime teacher and researcher, that I also really believe in following facts, in doing your homework, and in making sure that you follow science as we try to get as much information as possible. And so I want to thank you all for agreeing to do that today. Transparency is a cornerstone of government. We live in a vast galaxy, a lot of unanswered questions, and thank you all for being here today. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to one more time thank Mr. Burchett and Ms. Luna for bringing this to our attention. It's a topic that has interested me since I was in school. It was a very illuminating hearing. Obviously, I think several of us are going to look forward to getting some answers in a more confidential setting. I assume some legislation will come out of this.
Sure. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I need to compliment the folks in my office that did a lot of the work on this. Rachel and Noah sitting behind me. They're very quiet and humble, but without them, this thing would not have come off like it did, so I apologize.
Thank you. I think we're going to want to look into what we can do to make more of this information public. I think there's certainly a time period after which it should always be made public, and people have been concerned about these issues, like I said, since I was in high school. But in any event, I'd like to thank everybody who was here, sticking through the entire hearing. Without objection, the members will have 5 legislative days to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
Da hora, hein? Acabou.
Então, galera, é isso. É realmente histórico, né? No mínimo, né?
The truth is real.
Parece que a gente tá vendo um filme mesmo.
É isso, galera.
Cara, muito interessante e acho que já
Quer responder algumas perguntas aí pra gente finalizar? Ou tipo, mano, tenho 3 horas e meia certinho de live aqui. É bom, né? Finalizar aqui com considerações finais nossas.
A galera comentou algumas coisas ali. Eu acho que já, antes da gente encerrar aqui, já comentar que a gente tá planejando em fazer mais uma série de vídeos também e continuar aí com algumas lives. E hoje foi essa live inicial pra gente falar sobre UAPs, Congresso Americano, e a gente está planejando em falar sobre vida alienígena, mas não a vida alienígena agora, mas falar sobre o passado, sobre os deuses astronautas, a história da humanidade que foi esquecida. Então, assim, a gente vai falar sobre esse presente, mas investigar esse passado também, filosofar mais sobre isso. O Renan tem muito conteúdo sobre isso. Então...
na verdade, trazer uma união sobre esses conceitos, né, de conhecimento antigo com os novos, que eles estão interligados, querendo ou não. Às vezes falta para as pessoas algumas, tipo assim, coisas que ligam esses conhecimentos, sabe? A gente é a ponte, pelo menos como pesquisador, assim, sincero, divulgando aqui na internet. Minhas curiosidades, né? Começou com uma parada inocente, assim, de postar vídeos sobre coisas que eu não conseguia conversar. Mas que virou algo, tipo, sério, assim, virou um trabalho, virou uma parada importante, até um motivo de vida, assim, muito legal, porque pra mim é uma mudança de paradigma muito forte, sabe? Investigar esses assuntos, esses conteúdos, para as pessoas pensarem a respeito de coisas maiores, assim, que abrange a vida, né? Eu acho que isso é transformador. Tem gente que, isso aí não leva a nada e tal. Beleza, é a sua visão sobre a realidade, mas na minha visão isso altera e muito como a gente enxerga o mundo e como nós nos enxergamos, né? Como nós nos tratamos assim, como seres. Tipo assim, imagine se eu for desdenhar aqui todos os argumentos que eu tenho para falar assim, nós não somos a única raça inteligente no universo, autoconsciente, tem outras. Aí, mano, isso já gera uma infinitude de filosofias e compreensão sobre, tipo assim, cara, será que estamos vivendo, tipo assim, certos no planeta? Será que a forma que o nosso governo é organizado está correto, sabe? Será que esses seres humanos passando fome, o sistema, essas paradas, sabe? Começo a pensar sobre coisas avançadas. Então, para mim, é algo primordial filosofar sobre isso. E ainda mais com com essas provas, né? Com essas coisas acontecendo, esses disclosures acontecendo aí. Eu acho que é estonteante, assim, tipo, falar, cara, isso expande muito sua consciência. Isso traz uma perspectiva nova sobre enxergar o seu próprio eu, ser humano, sabe? E eu e o Dayon vai trazer essa filosofia aí nessa série que a gente quer trazer sobre os antigos e tal. Em uma pegada mais leve, assim, mais filosófica, mais descontraída, mais racionaliza, assim, tipo, racional, né, no caso. Mais racional até onde essa filosofia chega, até por que isso não é divulgado, por que as pessoas não falam sobre isso. E é maluquice, não é, sabe? Eu acho que eu e o Dayon traria uma abordagem legal, assim, pra vocês.
Eu acho que, cara, falar sobre alienígena ou falar sobre vida extraterrestre no mínimo, confirmando isso, assim, a gente entendendo claramente, publicamente, né, confirmando isso, cara, isso muda tudo. Isso muda todo o nosso sistema político, econômico, planetário, a nossa consciência de espécie, de sobrevivência, tecnologia. Tipo, é uma mudança de paradigma
Sim.
de consciência planetária. Não é algo simples, tipo, tem ET ou tanto faz, entendeu? Isso muda tudo, né? Então, é uma coisa que a gente tem que estar falando sobre isso e até comentando sobre as lives que a gente está planejando em fazer e sobre também essa visão que às vezes a gente tem isolada de tipo assim, será que tem ET ou não? Mas se tem ET, por que eles não falam com a gente? Por que eles não aparecem? E tipo assim, e daí eles falam assim, mas será que os ETs estão investigando a gente? Eles até perguntam, né? Eles estão coletando informações? Só que isso é o tipo de pensamento que só leva em consideração o presente. Tipo, imaginando que a gente tá aqui, vivendo a nossa vida, acabou de chegar um ZT e eles estão, tipo assim, investigando a nossa espécie, quem será essa espécie, quem é a humanidade, tipo assim, como se fosse isso, né? As pessoas não levam em consideração toda a linha do tempo, todo o passado, os milhares e milhões de anos que tem esse planeta, tudo que aconteceu aqui. E se a gente realmente volta no tempo e vai ler lá o relato de várias civilizações, eles estão falando sobre deuses, astronautas, sobre civilizações das estrelas, civilizações avançadas, tipo assim, várias civilizações que estão falando sobre isso, que falam que foi ensinado pra gente a alquimia, a matemática, a linguagem, várias questões de medicina foram ensinadas pro ser humano por esses deuses astronautas, né? Não foi como a gente desenvolvesse isso.
Tem todo um rolê, tem todo esse rolê. O que eu ia falar é que, te cortando rapidão, é que tá interligado uma coisa na outra, sabe? Essas informações que a gente tem do passado parece até um amadurecimento. Tipo assim, são informações infantis, falando assim, dessa forma, mas tipo, de mais fácil absorção, de digerir, né, do ser humano mais novo, consciencialmente falando, sabe? Tipo assim, nós somos uma raça que está começando a engatinhar agora, entender sobre outros planetas, outras civilizações, sabe? E que essas informações que foram tragas do passado, tipo assim, que vem através do tempo, desde o passado ali na Bíblia, enfim, são informações para a gente ir digerindo, que lá na frente a gente, caraca, era isso que eles estavam querendo dizer. São chaves que estão sendo destravadas, que tem todo um protocolo evolutivo, no caso, que é o que eu acredito, no caso, que traz essa filosofia sobre assim, tem seres que estão nos observando há vários tempos, sabe, há vários anos. Outros seres, outras civilizações mais avançadas.
E a gente entendendo isso, a gente falando sobre isso, cara, isso muda toda a perspectiva, tipo, e se esses caras já estão aqui milhares de anos? Se eles conhecem a nossa espécie muito mais que a gente conhece, tipo, e se na verdade tem bases intraterrenas que os caras saem de dentro do mar, entendeu? Tipo, Às vezes a nave não tá nem pesquisando a gente, ela tá resolvendo outro problema, ela tá indo de uma base a outra ali, resolvendo problemas que você acha que, tô investigando o ser humano. O cara tá trabalhando ali, entendeu? Tipo,
Sim.
Então, assim, é muita coisa que dá pra filosofar. Tem vários temas que a gente podia ter aprofundado mais hoje, só que a gente não pode, senão vai dar 1 milhão de horas aqui a live.
Já tá indo pra 4 horas aqui.
Então a gente tem que fazer outras lives. Né?
Valeu, galera. Todo mundo aí que participou. Em breve vem mais lives com o Dayon.x, da SpaceX. Tô zoando. E até a próxima. Tamo junto aí. Livezona. Pra mim passou rápido o tempo. Não sei se é porque eu gosto do assunto, mas foi muito bom. Vai ficar live aqui. Vai ficar salva a live aqui, tá? E é isso. Dá os seus considerações finais aí, Dayon. Seu tchau.
É isso, galera. Satisfação imensa estar aqui com vocês. Todo mundo conectado aí. Todo mundo bem consciente de todos esses processos. E a gente tem mais assuntos a falar sobre isso, e até o pessoal estava comentando algumas coisas sobre Bíblia ali e alienígenas, e a princípio o próximo episódio a gente vai falar sobre Bíblia, mas trazendo uma outra releitura sobre isso, já falando sobre outras questões.
Revisitação sobre a Bíblia.
Filosofando aí e trazendo conteúdos novos, tá? E, cara, agradecer o Renan, agradecer a todo mundo, agradecer o Congresso Americano por essa reunião maravilhosa.
Sinistro,
E eu
né?
só, para parafrasear um comentário que apareceu aqui que eu achei muito legal, eles somos nós. Então, eu acho que eu encerraria com essa frasezinha.
Massa. Tamo junto, galera. Valeu aí por quem compartilhou, por quem deu like aí, por quem compareceu, fortalecendo aqui a live. E até as próximas lives que vai ter aqui com o Dayon também. Igual a gente falou aí que tá tendo tem esse projeto desses estudos, dessas filosofias para trazer em live, entendeu? Que eu acho que é mais dinâmico aqui no canal. E o seu like ajuda bastante aqui a fortalecer. O algoritmo identifica que vocês estão gostando do conteúdo. E o meu canal volte a ter, né, o engajamento que tinha antes, que tá difícil, tá foda, mas não vamos desistir. E é isso, tamo junto, até a próxima live. Espero que tenham gostado. A live vai ficar salva. Estudem a live, assiste mais vezes. Eu vou assistir depois, tá ligado? Porque, mano, isso é uma parada... velho, não tem nem o que dizer. É disclosure, é expansão da consciência. É inevitável, isso tem que acontecer. Tá acontecendo já, né? E é isso. Valeu. Até a próxima, galera.
Apocalipse significa revelação.
Revelations.
Valeu, galera.
Valeu. Até mais.